Chapter 760. The fallen immortals are coming soon. In the darkness, Black's words were earth-shattering. Luo Zhao's primordial spirit trembled and was extremely shocked. He repeated the sentence to make sure that he didn't hear it wrong. As a result, he only heard Black's disdainful laughter. Heh. After the shock, Luo Zhao began to think about the meaning behind this sentence, but he didn't know where to sort it out. After a long silence, Luo Zhao finally couldn't calm down and asked in a deep voice, "Why?" Of course, he had a reason to ask why. He had worked hard and sacrificed everything he had to finally break the nail in Black. He thought that he had made a great contribution and greatly slowed down the progress of the arrival of the fallen immortals. Who knew that in exchange for such a sentence from Black, the fallen immortals were coming soon? Why? The early arrangement of the fallen immortals in the City of Immortals was basically broken. The mind disorientation powder was solved, the vortex of the fallen was destroyed, and Black was trapped here. They were already at their wits' end, so why could they come to 9 regions soon? Because I failed, of course, they will come in person. Black said lightly, but every word he said was like a heavy hammer that hit Luo Zhao's heart. You failed, so they will come in person? Black sneered and said, "What else? What do you think will happen? After I, the strongest chess piece, have been knocked out, the fallen immortals have no choice. Either they come in person, or they give up their plan to come here and let you, a group of ants, celebrate. Which one do you think they will choose?" Luo Zhao was tongue-tied. His body could not help but shake, and his mouth was full of bitterness. He wanted to point at Black's nose and scold him for talking nonsense and absurdity, but every word of Black's was so logical that it was completely impossible to refute. Yes, since all the chess pieces in his hand were wasted, of course, the chess player could only go to the battlefield in person. Why didn't he think of such a simple truth before? Thinking of this, Luo Zhao's thoughts became more and more chaotic. He had thought that this would be an unparalleled achievement, enough to support him to suppress Wang Lu, but he did not expect that it would cause such a great disaster. Perhaps the reason why Wang Lu didn't kill Black wasn't because he didn't have a way, but because he had already seen through this, so he would rather use a more gentle method to stall for time. Just like what he did at the opening ceremony of the grand competition. As for him, he, who fancied himself clever, had dragged the entire 9 regions into the abyss. The more he thought about it, the colder Luo Zhao felt his entire body go cold. His heart seemed as if it was struck by a sledgehammer, and it painfully constricted. The glow of his soul core flickered, and it displayed that his mental state was already extremely unstable. However, just before he collapsed, a fire snake swept over and swept away his chaotic thoughts. What replaced it was a vigorous fighting spirit. Damn it, so what if the fallen immortals come? If they can come here without the guidance of the chess pieces from the lower realm, then the fallen immortals will come sooner or later. The result will be the same whether I do it or not. No, cutting off their chess pieces will disrupt their rhythm in any case. Perhaps they can come ahead of time, but it's better to do it in a hurry than to wait for them to come after they're ready. Yes, if they can come to 9 regions at will, why would they need to support their chess pieces? Wouldn't it be better to do it themselves? There must be great obstacles in the passage between the 2 realms, which will lead to various restrictions when they come. In that case, I don't need to feel guilty at all, because I didn't do anything wrong. So what if the fallen immortals come ahead of time? I can subdue Black, so I can subdue the fallen immortals. If I can subdue a fallen immortal dog, let alone Wang Lu, even if it's He Chu Daoren, so what? Yes, the next target is that fallen immortal who doesn't have eyes. Thinking of this, the flames in Luo Zhao's eyes almost gushed out. In this regard, Black smiled slightly and said, "It seems that you haven't been scared to death." Upon hearing this, Luo Zhao's heart suddenly turned cold. "You've said so much to me, but what you've done seems to be a bit beyond your duty, right?" Black said, "So, let me ask you one last time, are you ready for your god of war blood?" Luo Zhao was stunned, and then burst into a crazy laughter. "Wang Lu, what are you going to do next?" "Yes, what should I do next?" Wang Lu sighed and drove the giant divine weapon to sit down on the top of the mountain, which made a slight vibration. A few months ago, this was completely impossible to do. Once the 1,000-feet-tall giant sat down, no mountain could bear its weight. The mountains collapsed, the earth split, and it was a scene of destruction. However, after a few months, there was no longer that giant in the Thunder Reservoir realm. Now, sitting on the top of the mountain was a giant puppet that was 200 feet long. Although it was still huge and burly compared to the child-faced woman beside the puppet, it was no longer that bulky appearance that made it hard for the world to contain it. This was, of course, thanks to the improvement of the synchronization rate. When the synchronization rate reached 20%, Wang Lu could finally fully control this powerful puppet and freely use most of its functions and magical abilities, including the enlargement and shrinkage of the puppet. The 1,000-feet-tall giant was only the original form. With the adjustment of the internal structure and the activation of the array, the giant divine weapon could be extended by another 100 times, becoming a terrible war machine comparable to the size of Gisaurus. It could also shrink by 100 times, becoming the size of a normal person. Of course, this step was not yet possible for Wang Lu. The giant divine weapon that Sun Buping built for 10,000 years contained trillions of small metal cubes, each of which was engraved with tens of thousands of glyphs. It was not easy to compress such a huge basic structure as a whole. On the other hand, if it could be done, it meant that Wang Lu had an incredibly powerful war machine. To compress the power of the 1,000-feet-tall giant into 1 meter, the combination of agility and explosive power was probably enough to surpass any cultivator in 9 regions. However, to do that, the synchronization rate must at least exceed 40%. Judging from the current progress, although it could not be said to be far away, there was still a long way to go. Thinking about the road in the future, Wang Lu drove the giant divine weapon and was silent on the top of the mountain. Tetragon, who was beside him, asked, "In 3 days, Thunder Reservoir will fall apart. At that time, it is likely that we will be intercepted by Black as soon as we go out. Are you ready to fight now?" "I can fight at any time. But, I don't think he will come. That guy has been lurking around you and Sun Buping for so long, so he should have this little bit of cleverness. He can't stop Sun Buping from choosing his successor, so he should have guessed what kind of opponent he will face when we meet again." Tetragon somewhat regretfully said, "Yes, if it weren't for my injury, I would not lose to him alone." Previously, she was seriously injured by Black in Thunder Reservoir, which had always been a stain on Tetragon's mind. The opponent was obviously far inferior to her in strength, but he took advantage of her carelessness and caused her serious injury that could not be healed for several years. "Since he won't come here, will there be any problems in the City of Immortals?" "Don't worry, since that guy Wang Wu has followed him, there will be no problem." "You do trust her?" In her opinion, at least half of the property in the entire City of Immortals should belong to her. How could she allow a mere lackey of the fallen immortal to destroy all of this? Believe me, when it comes to protecting wealth, she is basically invincible. "But, I have a hunch," Wang Lu said and drove the giant divine weapon to stand up. The hundreds of millions of cubes on its body rotated at the same time and began to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy and release the immortal spirit. "What hunch?" "When we go out this time, I'm afraid we will meet a stronger opponent than Black. Think about it, as a chess piece in the hands of the fallen immortals, Black's most important task should be to prevent the resurrection of Sun Buping. But now he has failed on the verge of success. As a chess piece, he has no value." Tetragon didn't respond. "So what?" "That means that either the fallen immortals change to a more powerful chess piece, or, it's time for those chess players to play in person." "Impossible," Tetragon said decisively. "At that time, we desperately closed the passage between the 2 worlds. It's not so easy to open it. But in fact, that passage has been opened a long time ago." Wang Lu was a little surprised and said, "Didn't I tell you the story of the golden generation of Lingjian school?" "Yes, you did, but..." Tetragon shook his head and said, "I don't think it's really the fallen immortals. You haven't seen the real fallen immortals, so you don't understand how powerful the other party is. If it's really the fallen immortals, it's impossible for your golden generation to survive. With the current power of 9 regions, any fallen immortal can sweep the continent and be invincible. Wang Lu didn't bother to explain to her how many things happened that year and said, "Think whatever you want." However, even if it's not the real fallen immortal, it's at least an exceptionally powerful chess piece. For them to be able to lay such a chess piece in 9 regions, it seems that the passage between the 2 worlds is indeed in jeopardy. Tetragon said and then stood up. "After I go out, I'm going to find time to patrol for 9 weeks and reinforce the seal." "Alright, after we go out, if there's a chance, I'll try to reinforce the seal first, although I doubt that it's meaningful to do so." 3 days later, the magical ability of momentary youth disappeared, and the distorted time and space backtracked, which instantly crushed the entire Thunder Reservoir realm. Wang Lu and Tetragon left the Thunder Reservoir realm smoothly through the gap of time and space and came to the vast sea of stars. The starlight around them was still the same. It seemed that there was no change from 3 years ago. In fact, of course not. They had been in the Thunder Reservoir realm for 3 years, but only 3 days had passed in the outside world. 3 days was not enough to change too many things, but it was enough for 9 regions to welcome an uninvited guest. In the bitter cold land of the far north, a shadow quietly descended. "Useless waste, I actually have to do it myself. Thank you for Satsujinki's floating red reward. May Day is coming. I wish everyone a happy holiday in advance." Chapter 761. Humph, it's this hypocritical peace carnival again. On an inconspicuous narrow street in the B7 area of the City of Immortals, Luo Xiao was wearing a heavy cloak, which completely concealed his figure and appearance. In the hustle and bustle of the city, he turned into a silent passerby and watched the grand ceremony of the City of Immortals with cold eyes. Since the establishment of the city, there have been countless kinds of ceremonies. In the grand competition, the Wuxia League naturally needed to celebrate its big victory, small victory, and even undefeated victory. In addition to the contestants who needed to prepare for the competition, most of the other people who came to the City of Immortals to watch the competition spent their time in various celebrations. In this regard, many people expressed considerable concern. The cultivators did not cultivate and did not do production. Every day, they watched the competition in the City of Immortals, reveled, and indulged in luxury, which was quite unfavorable to the overall development of the immortal cultivation world. However, the organizing committee claimed that when the immortal cultivation world developed to a certain stage, the proportion of the entertainment industry would naturally exceed the material production. To this end, the organizing committee also hired many highly respected experts and scholars in the immortal cultivation world to write articles to prove it. The structure was clear and organized, and all kinds of data were very detailed, which made people unable to refute it. Thus, this view was gradually accepted by the mainstream, and people began to indulge in the celebration again and again with a clear conscience. However, this continuous carnival was, after all, a distorted phenomenon. It was not difficult for people with insight to see that people's need for carnival reflected their lack of confidence in reality and worry about the future. It was precisely because everyone felt that the Wuxia League was weaker than the Dixian League that they rejoiced in every victory. At the same time, it was also because people understood that regardless of the outcome of the grand competition, they would face a more terrifying opponent. Therefore, it was not a bad choice to get drunk today. Therefore, when he saw the wave of carnival in the City of Immortals again, Luo Xiao felt full of irony. Did these ignorant ants realize that while they were cheering, a shadow that could shroud the entire 9 regions had quietly descended? Did they realize that perhaps the entire immortal cultivation world of 9 regions was about to end? For ants, even if they work hard to cultivate, they are still ants. So no matter what they do, it doesn't matter. Just as Luo Xiao was deep in thought, a vague voice came from his feet. It was a black dog with an ugly appearance and its fur was covered in dust. It looked very dirty. However, a fierce look flashed across its eyes from time to time, showing that it was different from the others. Of course, it was different. After all, not all black dogs had the identity of an earth immortal. Hearing its voice, Luo Xiao sighed. Sometimes, I really wonder if you Dixian people even have such a thing as dignity. Dignity? Heh, only the living deserve to talk about dignity, the dead are just corpses. So, in order to save your dog life, you really became my dog? TSK, when I said that if you want the god of war blood, you'd have to be my dog obediently, it was just a casual remark. I didn't expect you to actually follow my words literally. I really admire you for going this far just to drag out an ignoble existence. In order to drag out an ignoble existence, I have done more shameful things. What else can you expect from a person who can betray his former companions? It was obviously a self-deprecating remark, but when it came out from the black dog's mouth, it made people feel a strong sense of irony. Luo Xiao narrowed his eyes and decided to give up this kind of argument with it and walked in silence. The two of them walked around the streets of B7 area for a long time. It was not until many cultivators began to be curious about the man and the dog that they moved their position and continued to walk in a low-key manner in the nearby urban area. It was just that, the scene of one man and one dog walking side by side made Luo Xiao particularly depressed. How long do we have to wait? Until the other party gives up looking for us. Black said flatly, those who are completely swallowed by mind disorientation powder are equivalent to handing over their lives. The fallen immortal can easily track our position and control our words and deeds. Even if you use the god of war blood to offset the effect of mind disorientation powder, there will inevitably be omissions. Now we have to use the chaotic aura of the City of Immortals to cover up our own aura. I hope we won't be found by that person. That person is irritable and impatient, so he won't spend too much time looking for us, the two defeated generals. But on the other hand, if he finds us, you and I will die without a burial place. Luo Xiao shook his head and said, how sure are you about the fallen immortal coming to the lower realm? Is it possible that you're mistaken? Stupid question. Although Black had been reduced to being a dog for Luo Xiao, it obviously had no respect for the dog owner. So, if he can't find us, what will he do next? Black was silent for a moment and said, he will recover his strength first. Right now, the passage between the two realms has not been completely opened. The fallen immortal needs to pay a great price to descend, and his strength will be consumed rapidly. Moreover, because the laws of 9 regions are different, the fallen immortal in the lower realm needs a certain amount of time to adapt. For him, the best choice is to find chess pieces like you and me and swallow them into his body, which can greatly speed up the recovery of his strength. But even if he doesn't find us, with his own ability, he can restore his true immortal strength in about 10 days. In other words, there are only 10 days left for us? It's not necessarily just the time left for us. Black said, I tried to strangle Sun Booping in Thunder Reservoir Realm but failed on the verge of success. Maybe there are some changes over there. We might as well leave the exploration to them. We just need to hide behind the scenes and make our move at the critical time. Wang Lu. Luo Zhao's face turned very ugly. Black, you share my god of war blood, so you should know that Wang Lu is not only my enemy, but also yours. If he is allowed to establish an unsurpassable merit, the god of war blood will bite back, and neither of us will survive. Don't worry, he can't do it. The one who descended is the Kanglan immortal who has touched the heavenly realm. In 9 regions, he is absolutely invincible. The only flaw is only known by his companions. Luo Xiao was very keenly aware of the faulty wording in this sentence and said, listening to you, you know his flaw? That's strange, can a running dog like you be considered as a companion of the fallen immortal? Of course I don't know, but I at least know that the invincible Kanglan immortal also has a flaw. As long as there is a flaw, we can try to find it. Of course, what we need most now is to stay dormant, so looking for the flaw has to be done by someone else. Upon hearing this, Luo Xiao suddenly understood and said, someone else, you mean Wang Lu? You want to use him to explore the way? Then you, a senior running dog, can take advantage of knowing the fallen immortal better, find out the other party's flaw first, and finally make a critical blow? That's a good idea. Then the question now is, how do we tell Wang Lu about the arrival of the fallen immortal without exposing our existence? Well, why don't we write an anonymous letter? There's no need for that. Black said in a cold voice, Wang Lu must know about the arrival of Kanglan, so we don't need to remind him. Kanglan is an old rival of Sun Buping. If Sun Buping comes back to life or passes something to Wang Lu, there's no reason for Wang Lu not to respond to Kanglan. Of course, if he's really that slow. Woof, woof, woof. Just as Black was about to go on, a passerby suddenly came from the opposite side of the road. This person's cultivation base was obviously not low. Before he appeared, neither Luo Xiao nor Black noticed him. After that person appeared, he stared at Black with burning eyes, as if he was surprised by the sound made by the black dog. It was not uncommon for spirit dogs to speak human language in the world, but Black was not playing the role of a spirit dog at this time, but just an ordinary native dog, and an ordinary native dog, of course, could not speak. In order to avoid being exposed, Black had to bark twice like a normal animal. Who knew that it would be fine if it didn't bark, but when it barked, it made the eyes of the passerby light up. Huh, big black dog. Although its appearance is mediocre, its bark is full of vigor and endless charm. Obviously, it's a good dog with good meat. Hey, buddy, I want to buy your dog. How much are you willing to sell it for? Luo Xiao was shocked. What did you say? The man said with a smile, I've been in the city of immortals for so long, but I haven't eaten good dog meat. Unexpectedly, in a place with a lot of people, there are also a lot of animal protectors, which makes people uncomfortable to eat. Now there's a rare opportunity. This dog doesn't seem to be a spirit dog or a spirit pet, so why don't you sell it to me? I'll give you 200 spirit stones, okay? 20,000. Damn it, it's you? At this time, Luo Xiao recovered and suppressed his shock. He didn't say the second half of the sentence, because he recognized that this passerby was Zen Master Guru. Zen Master Guru was famous for two things. One was that she had a world-famous bestie, Taoist Master Nanfei's Wang Wu. The second was that this person was extremely fanatical about dog meat. Although she had never done anything like stealing or poisoning dogs, in order to eat dog meat, what she did could not be called open and aboveboard. Encountering this kind of mental illness, Luo Xiao could only be unlucky. He waved his hand and refused the other party's request for a deal, and then led Black out of the alley. After Luo Xiao left, Zen Master Guru suddenly showed a slightly lonely expression. Alas, I was going to have a happy last meal. It's rare to see a native dog with an immortal flavor. This guy must have the bloodline of an immortal beast that has been dormant for tens of thousands of years. The taste must be unforgettable. What a pity, what a pity. Looking at Luo Xiao, mainly at the back of the black dog at his feet, Zen Master Guru's expression suddenly changed. No, I can't just let it go like this. My life must not end in regret. I must eat until my mouth is full of oil before I die. This unknown dog breeder, I'm really sorry, but your dog is mine. Chapter 762. In the high-level office courtyard of the organizing committee in Immortal 5 area of the City of Immortals, Feng Yin Daoist Master helplessly put down the folder in his hand. The official business that he needed to deal with was piled up like a mountain. Even with his powerful primordial spirit and skillful handling of official business, he still found it quite tricky. However, at this time, there was a person who wanted to give him trouble, which was really a big headache for him. Senior brother, look at this report. There's another shameless sect trying to use the opportunity of the grand competition to swindle money and things. Look at this shameless face, they dare to ask for millions of spirit stones for a substitute contestant. Why don't they just die? If you ask me, I should directly approve it. Since your sect is unable to cultivate talents, it's better to transfer the contestant to another sect for training. Let's see if they dare to ask for money. Senior brother, what do you think of my idea? If you don't mind, I'll sign it for you. Ha ha ha, don't worry about the handwriting. I've forged your handwriting for so many years that I can guarantee that even the sincerity paper can't be distinguished. Listening to this long list of words, the name that Feng Yin signed on the other report was crooked, which made Feng Yin, who liked tidiness, very upset. Wang Wu, are you really bored recently? If you're bored, I suggest you go into closed-door training and don't go out until you reach Yuanying stage. Senior brother, you know that I can't break through Yuanying stage, so what's the use of closed-door training? Moreover, I'm now the #1 king pill in 9 regions. When I reach Yuanying stage, I may not be the #1 Yuanying stage in 9 regions, so the advertising effect is far worse. If I go out to eat now, the inns will rush to invite me to eat and drink for free. Later, as long as I set up a sign saying that the #1 king pill in 9 regions has visited here, it would be an excellent advertisement. But if I advance to Yuanying stage, people can't just set up a sign saying that the number 65536 Yuanying stage in 9 regions has visited here, right? I thought it was some kind of advertisement where 100,000 people would win the prize. It's like this. Some time ago, I had a sudden impulse and looked at the sky at night. I saw the Death Gate star shining above your head. This is a sign that if you don't go into seclusion, you will regret it for the rest of your life. So, please don't waste your time here and go into seclusion. Senior martial brother, with your pair of eyes that can't tell the difference between tea and year without glasses, what kind of astronomical phenomena can you see? Ha ha ha, don't tell me you've been blinded by the street lights. Wang Wu chuckled as she nonchalantly pulled out a piece of paper from the pile of documents. It was the signature of some small sects applying for financial support from the organizing committee. Wang Wu glanced at it and curled her lips. Then, she scribbled a vivid middle finger on the leader's signature column and signed Feng Yin's name beside it. Feng Yin couldn't take it anymore. Wang Wu, a while ago, 8th brother sent a letter saying that he had discovered a rare treasure trove deep within the abyssal mountain, but he doesn't have enough manpower to excavate it. I see that you don't have anything to do recently. Why don't you help him scout the way? Isn't the ancient immortal trapping array located in the abyssal mountain? If I go there, I won't be able to come back. Senior martial brother, are you deliberately teasing me? No, I don't want to directly tell you to get lost because we're brothers and sisters of the same sect. With that, Feng Yin slammed the table. Suddenly, the entire courtyard shook. Of course, the mountainous pile of documents was also in a state of disunity. But Feng Yin didn't care anymore. Okay, I'll go. Wang Wu touched her head. I won't disturb you to cultivate the virgin skill by yourself. After Wang Wu left, Feng Yin looked at the mess in the room and felt even more tired. Lu Xian, are you there? Yes. While speaking, the second elder of the Heavenly Sword Hall suddenly appeared. He glanced around and shook his head. This guy is always so troublesome. Feng Yin said, her situation. You should have seen it. How is it? Lu Xian said, it's very unstable. Although she always pretends to be indifferent, but, to be honest, senior martial brother, even if you don't wear glasses, you can see that she is very weak right now. Yes, if she was in her normal state, I'm afraid I would have been so angry that I would have turned the entire courtyard upside down. Lu Xian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He nodded. Actually, I originally judged it based on this. As he spoke, he picked up a newspaper on the ground. Imitating your handwriting to draw a middle finger? That's too child's play. If she was in her normal state, she would at least draw. In short, what she made was much more horrifying than this. Do you think it's necessary to let Old Seventh take a look? No need. Although Old Seventh's medicine skills are unparalleled in the world, he can't handle this kind of thing. I don't know what the hell Wang Wu is doing, but her primordial spirit is close to collapse. Her non-phase method should be the most stable. Although she often updates the version, her physical body and primordial spirit are very stable. Even if measured by the supreme level standard, they are still very good. Feng Yin Daoist master was also confused about this. He said, that's why I let you come and take a look. These days, I replaced Wang Lu to keep watch here, so I can't grasp the details of what's going on outside. Lu Xian said, speaking of which, I really don't know where that kid Wang Lu went. As for Wang Wu's side, there's no other situation, but there's one thing that I think is a bit strange. Her scoundrel friends seem to be getting fewer and fewer. Speaking of which, those friends of hers. Senior martial brother, are you familiar with them? Feng Yin shook his head. I've never seen them, and I don't know when she got to know those people. And what's even more strange is that some of them, with her temperament, should not be able to make friends with her, but their relationship is as good as sisters. Lu Xian said, moreover, each of them has a unique skill. They may not necessarily have earth-shattering strength, but in a certain field, they have basically reached the top level in the world. Apart from that, there were very few overlapping fields in which they were good at. Wait a minute, senior martial brother, do you feel that perhaps they are? Upon hearing this, Feng Yin's eyes became bigger and bigger. He said, what do you mean? Lu Xian softly said, perhaps, they are all members of a secret organization? Yes, I think so too. To be able to gather such a group of special people, it can only be the power of an organization, right? Moreover, it's an organization that only accepts female cultivators with certain specialties. Regardless of race, age, or any other factors, as long as they are women, as long as they have a skill, they can join. I guess the initiator should be a feminist. However, after the establishment of this organization, it seems that there is no special purpose. Yes, I haven't heard of such an organization that has done anything big. It should be similar to a like-minded group. It's not a bad thing for 5th junior martial sister to join such an organization and get to know all kinds of cultivators. Moreover, there are so many capable people in that organization, so it should be helpful to her current situation, right? Unfortunately, I can't leave now, so I can't help her too much. Senior martial brother, you've helped her enough for so many years. Let her deal with her own matter. At the same time, a certain spirit sword sect elder who joined the secret female organization was drinking herself into oblivion in a restaurant. Waiter, hurry up and bring more wine. Didn't I tell you not to stop the wine on the table? Is your restaurant okay? Guest, you've already drunk more than 200 kilograms, you can't drink anymore, why can't I drink? Haven't you heard the old saying? There's only a tired cow, not a field that gets soaked. Do you think I look like I'm going to get soaked? No, but you can't drink too much of this wine, because my family doesn't have that much. Are you afraid that I can't afford it? What a joke. I, the #1 king pill in 9 regions, come to your house to drink your signature wine. Just the advertising fee alone is worth a lifetime free discount. Moreover, although I don't have any cash, I can sign the bill. Whose signature do you want? I'll show it to you. Do you want the sect leader's signature? Bring me the wine, I'll give you an IOU of 10,000 spirit stones. In short, bring me the wine. The waiter had no choice but to obediently bring the 2 jars of wine. As a result, not long after they were put on the table, they were all drunk. At this time, the shopkeeper's face was already bitter. Initially, for the sake of advertising effect, he invited this great goddess to his restaurant, only to find out that it was a big hole. With her making such a fuss, how could the restaurant still have any business? What advertising effect would be gone? Just when the shopkeeper was in despair, a guest came in with a smile. However, without waiting for the waiter to greet him, he waved his hand to indicate that he didn't need anyone to accompany him. Then, he went up to the 2nd floor and walked to the side of Wang Wu. Yo, Xiao Wu, isn't it boring to drink alone? Why don't you call me? Wang Wu's eyes were blurred from drunkenness. Xiao Qi. Ha, it's me. Besides me, who else can accompany you to drink now? Wang Wu was silent for a moment. They are still here. In a sense, that's true. Unfortunately, they can't accompany you to drink, right? So, you should cherish the people in front of you. Xiao Qi said, unceremoniously picked up a jar of wine and drank it like a whale drinking water. Xiao Wu, there's something I need your help with. What's the matter? I want to eat a good meal. Wang Wu froze for a moment and then turned to look at the waiter. What do you want to eat? Just order it, I can sign the bill. No, not this kind of common goods sold in restaurants. I want a unique, unforgettable, no, even if I die, I won't forget a peerless delicacy. Wang Wu froze for a moment, then quickly waved her hand. No, no, I can't let you eat Xiao Bai. Wang Lu especially treasures that little guy. In the past, he even had an ambiguous relationship with her mother. If I feed her to you, Wang Lu will kill me. Hey! What kind of person do you think I am? That, Xiao Bai can't either. Xiao Wu. You hurt me too much, okay? In your eyes, I'm a heartless animal just to eat dog meat. Wang Wu thought for a moment. I can put it in a more gentle and positive way, but in essence, you really do everything for a bite of good dog meat. Do you need me to give you some examples? Shao Qi was suddenly speechless. After a while, he said, well, to tell you the truth, I really have no interest in Bai Shixian and Quan Zouhua. Because, you've heard that old saying, right? 1 black, 2 yellow, 3 flowers, 4 white. Of those 2, 1 is white, 1 is flower, both belong to inferior goods. I have no interest. Chapter 763. This is the one and only black dog you were talking about, the one that stole the fortune of heaven and earth? It doesn't look like much. In the private room of the restaurant, Zen Master Guru excitedly showed Wang Wu the tracking map she had drawn. There was a vivid black dog on the map. There was a human figure beside the dog, but it was blurry and squeezed into the corner of the map. There was only one small dog, and it looked very perfunctory. This was a tracking map drawn by a cultivator's spell. It could lock onto the target's position and show its status. Zen Master Guru spent a lot of effort before carefully avoiding the dog's owner and drawing this tracking map. But no matter how Wang Wu looked at it, the dog on the map was just an ordinary meat dog. She couldn't understand why Shao Qi would spend so much effort on a meat dog. Ordinary meat dog? That's not professional. This dog looks ordinary, but there's a trace of immortal charm hidden in its body. I'm afraid it's an inheritance from the prehistoric era. If I didn't have a pair of godly eyes for dogs, I wouldn't be able to see it. This kind of hidden bloodline is the rarest. Generally speaking, immortal bloodlines are either extremely powerful, passed down from generation to generation without reducing its purity. Or, with the passage of time, the descendants can only inherit a small part of their ancestors' supernatural abilities. If they want to develop it, they need to continuously trace back to their roots. And this kind of bloodline that has been condensed for tens of thousands of years but is extremely hidden, it's the first time I've seen it after eating dogs for so many years. As Shao Qi spoke, his body trembled with excitement. His cheeks were crimson, and crystal droplets of liquid hung from the corner of his mouth. Wang Wu was shocked. I say, Shao Qi, wake up. You're thinking about a big black dog right now. It's not good for your reputation to have an orgasm now. Shao Qi was shocked. He wiped away his saliva and glared at Wang Wu. Then he explained, you can't understand the attraction of a dog with this bloodline to foodie people. Wang Wu was confused. Is it really that delicious? I don't think you're this interested in little white usually. To be honest, it might not be delicious. Shao Qi explained, in fact, although Little White is an immortal beast, it may not taste better than a native dog in the mortal world. After all, immortal level blood is not used for seasoning. But I've been eating dogs for so many years, I'm tired of eating dog meat no matter how delicious it is. Wang Wu smiled and said, then why are you so excited? This is a problem of the collection rate of delicacies. As a professional dog meat gourmet, just eating the best was not considered a skill. To be able to eat all kinds of dog meat in the world and store the taste in the primordial spirit, so that the collection rate could reach 100%, that was the real skill. Over the years, I've basically eaten the most delicious ones, and I've also used various opportunities to taste several kinds of super rare dog meats, including the meat of celestial dogs. However, there were a few bloodlines that he had never had the chance to eat, and this bloodline was one of them. I don't expect to eat all the dog meat in the world in this short life. After all, there is no such thing as pure gold, but if I can have one more, I will never miss the opportunity to increase the collection rate. Well, I'll allow you to eat it, but can't you do this kind of thing alone? why are you talking to me? Xiaoqi said, I need you to help me catch the dog. I offered 20,000 spirit stones to the dog owner before, but he didn't sell it. It seems that he is not someone who can be bought with money. Wang Wu interrupted, that's because you didn't offer a high enough price. There is no object in this world that can't be bought with money. You can try to offer 200 million. Not to mention his dog, I think even his mother can be sold. Xiaoqi said, well, why don't you sponsor me 200 million spirit stones? Let me experience the infinite power of money. Wang Wu was silent for a moment, and then said seriously. Or we can take a shortcut, such as drugging the dog and find a chance to steal it. No, you just asked him for a price. If the dog disappeared in a short time, it would be easy to associate it with you. So, we might as well do it secretly. Xiaoqi asked, how do we do it secretly? It's very simple. It's like hiding a drop of water in the sea. We can drug the dog owner and then steal all the valuable things in his house. Or we can do it secretly. I'll go to Old 7 and ask for some strange drugs. I'll drug the dog owner and his neighbors, and then I'll take all their property. In this way, no one will notice that we lost a black dog. Speaking of this, Wang Wu's eyes lit up, and she seemed eager to try. Don't worry, Xiaoqi, you're my best friend. I will fulfill your wish for you no matter what. To be honest, don't you feel guilty for using your best friend to fulfill your ugly desires? As long as we don't lose money, it doesn't matter if we lose or not. At the same time, in another corner of the City of Immortals. The feeling of palpitation? Luo Xiao curiously asked the big black dog at his feet. It's as if I've been locked by some powerful existence. The former high-level member of Dixian, who had transformed into the black dog, said seriously, right now, I feel very bad. Luo Xiao also felt a bit heavy when he heard this. Is it Kanglan? I can't avoid him even if I hide in the City of Immortals. It's not Kanglan. Black said, although he has just arrived and his power is still at a low point, the oppression of being locked by the fallen immortal will be 10 times stronger than it is now. I'm afraid I can't even talk to you. Luo Zhao's brain turned quickly. Then could it be that inexplicable woman from before? The one who offered 20,000 spirit stones to buy you? Her. Black thought for a moment and then lifted up the remaining trace of immortal spirit in his body. He immediately realized that he had been traced, which made him angry. Who the hell is she? How dare she do something to me? Damn it, if I still have my cultivation base, would take her dog life. How could someone dare to complicate matters at a time like this? Luo Xiao said sarcastically, who can you blame for this? I'm afraid that Kanglan is so afraid that he even abandoned his own body and turned himself into a dog to hide himself. So, if there's any trouble, it's your own fault. Ignorant fool, it's just because you haven't seen the power of the fallen immortal. In the past, Sun Buping could only be regarded as the inferior among the fallen immortals. After he came to 9 regions, because of the impact on his primordial spirit, he couldn't even recall his past cultivation method. Even so, he still became the king of Dixian. Kanglan Immortal is a relatively powerful existence among the fallen immortals. Even if his strength is damaged because the passage has not been opened, it's enough to sweep 9 regions. If you want to survive in his hands, nothing is too much. Hearing Black's solemn words, Luo Xiao put away his sarcastic tone and said seriously, so, for this terrible opponent, what we have to do is to wait here? We have to wait, at least until Wang Lu and the others take the initiative to fight with Kanglan. Only then can we get out of the City of Immortals. Otherwise, no matter how careful your plan is and how cautious your action is, it's not worth mentioning for the fallen immortal. He can lock you in one thought, come to you in an instant, and destroy your body and soul. If you want to live longer, you have to wait patiently. Even after 10 days, when he recovers his true immortal strength and sweeps through 9 regions, there will be Wanxian League and other Dixian immortals in front of him. You and I must hide behind the scenes. Luo Xiao, you must understand the value of you and me in this war. Okay, then let's wait patiently. Hey, do you smell anything strange? Black looked up and said, "Strange smell? Even you, a dog, can't smell it, is it my illusion? But I do feel that the air in this room smells wrong." Before his voice fell, Luo Zhao's expression suddenly changed. "Damn it, someone poisoned us? I can't raise my true yuan. What's your situation? Hey, talk to me, you. Damn it, you actually fainted?" After shouting these words, Luo Zhao began to feel that his eyelids became heavy, and before long, he couldn't hold it anymore and fainted to the ground. Damn it, at this time, who on earth did this to him? Wasn't this new trouble a little too big? This was going to drag the future of the entire 9 regions into it. In the haze, Luo Zhao heard a woman's lively voice. "Ha, it's a success. Next, let's sweep his whole family and take away all the valuable things." This voice was vaguely familiar. It was just that, before Luo Zhao could recall the owner of the voice, he had completely fallen into a coma. At the same time, in another corner of the group of immortal tombs, the place where thousands of tribulation thunders gathered suddenly disappeared. The dazzling lightning and the distorted space all disappeared without a trace at this moment. The only thing left behind was a tall metal puppet and a petite girl shrouded in purple light. After these two people appeared, the puppet suddenly trembled. The girl cast a concerned look and then got an explanation. "Feeling of palpitation?" The girl asked doubtfully, "What's wrong? Is there a problem with your synchronization?" "It's not a problem with synchronization." A slightly dull voice came from the tall metal puppet. "It should be something left by sun booping. Just now, a strange wave suddenly gushed out of this giant divine weapon, which made my heart start to twitch. It was as if I was stared at by some terrifying beast, or as if I suddenly stared at some excellent prey, which made me nervous and excited." The girl thought for a moment and her face changed slightly. "I'm afraid this is the early warning mechanism of the giant divine weapon being triggered." Early warning mechanism? Whose warning is it? Who else could it be? The giant divine weapon is the ultimate weapon made by sun booping. In front of it, all the creatures in 9 regions are as weak as ants. What can make the giant divine weapon vigilant is, of course, the fallen immortal. After a pause, the girl said in a deep voice, "I'm afraid your guess is true. The fallen immortal has begun to descend." "Descend? Then let's go kill him." With that, the huge metal puppet flashed away. Chapter 764. In the bitter and cold land of the extreme north, the cold wind whistled like a knife, and the sky was full of snow. The vast expanse of whiteness was like a piece of gauze, covering the sky and the sun. This place was located in the first level of the 9 regions, a well-known dead land of the 9 regions. The boundless white snow and glacier could not breed many creatures. Except for a few ice spirits and snow monsters, only the whistling wind could bring a little vitality to the dead land. Suddenly, an uninvited guest came to this dead land. Boom! With an earth-shattering noise, the glacier in the extreme north bloomed with huge cracks and then broke. A gray giant shadow showed a magnificent outline in the broken ice. The giant shadow's whole body shone with dazzling luster, which shone with the sparkling and translucent ancient mysterious ice, like a group of bright stars. The giant shadow appeared out of thin air, cracked the glacier, and then stepped on the broken ice and frozen soil, striding forward. Every step caused the earth to shake and the glacier to crack. The accumulated snow on the distant snow-capped mountain rolled down. This giant walked on the glacier like a beast from the age of desolation. Every time it raised its hand or foot, it had endless power. The ice spirits and snow monsters that lived on the snow-capped mountain panicked and ran away. A moment later, a snow-white giant dragon soared up from the age of desolation. The dragon race of 9 regions was born noble. It was a superior bloodline inherited from the age of desolation. The adult dragon race had supreme magical ability. This giant dragon had been sleeping here for thousands of years. When it woke up, it was full of panic. Its long body twisted several times and then flew straight into the sky, disappearing without a trace. This giant that suddenly appeared in this world of ice and snow was so unstoppable. However, not long after it ran, a purple cloud flashed across the sky like lightning, rolling toward the giant's chest and violently hitting it. The giant's huge body suddenly stiffened and stopped in place, unable to take a step forward. The purple cloud actually twisted and changed its shape, as if it was about to collapse. After a while, it condensed into a human shape. Tetragon's pretty eyes were filled with tears. Her hands held her red head, but her eyes were filled with shock and anger. Wang Lu, are you crazy? The giant slowly shook his head. My IQ is very high, how could I be crazy? If you weren't crazy, why would you dare to come to this place? As Tetragon spoke, he forcefully pushed the giant's chest, as if trying to push him out of this bitter cold land. Do you really think you're invincible just because you have a synchronization rate of 30%? Even if you fight against me in my heyday, you may not have a 100% chance of winning. How dare you provoke the genuine fallen immortal? If I don't come now, I won't have the chance in the future, Wang Lu said and stopped walking. How could he not know what kind of personality Tetragon had after living with him for 3 years? If there was no reasonable explanation, she would not hold it in for the time being. If they couldn't convince her, then they would have to fight. Time was precious, so Wang Lu could only make it short. The fallen immortal who came here is not in a complete state. The passageway between the two worlds hasn't been opened yet, so he'll have to pay a price for coming here rashly. Tetragon was shocked. How did you know? At that time, the passage between the two worlds was almost opened. It was the cultivators of my Lingjian school who blocked the breach one after another. Naturally, I know more about this passageway than anyone else. Wang Lu explained in a deep voice, and then said, moreover, the signal from the giant divine weapon just now, in addition to an early warning, also seems to be a kind of urging. Urging? While he's sick, urging him to die. I don't know how much power the fallen immortal will lose when they forcibly come to this world. But since the giant divine weapon didn't want me to escape, but urged me to go, I think there should be a chance of winning. Upon hearing this, Tetragon was silent. After a long while, he said, with a synchronization rate of 30%, your strength is only a bit stronger than my heyday. In a head-on confrontation, you are far from being the opponent of the fallen immortal, unless it's the most despicable ones. However, if you have a synchronization rate of more than 80%, even the strongest among the fallen immortals can fight. You really don't need to be so anxious. Wang Lu said, how long will it take for the synchronization rate to go from 30% to 80%? 1 year, 2 years, or 8 or 10 years? In the past 3 years, I was able to break through 30% thanks to an epiphany. And from 30% to 80%, how many epiphanies do I need? Hearing Wang Lu mention the word epiphany, Tetragon's face suddenly turned red, but she quickly suppressed it, so it was not obvious. Moreover, what Wang Lu said was right, so she had no way to refute it. So, that's why you're here to kill him? Although this move is indeed risky, it's worth the risk. The only problem is... Wang Lu, who was driving the giant divine weapon, frowned slightly and said, that guy is very vigilant and actually hid himself. It doesn't matter, I'll look for him. Tetragon took a deep breath and then operated her immortal spirit. The Emperor's purple chi erupted like a volcano, gushing out from the center of her forehead and straight into the sky. A moment later, the world of ice and snow was shrouded in purple. The 9 regions was vast and boundless. Even the land of a region was tens of millions of miles. Although this extreme north was not included in the number of 9 regions, its area was not inferior to that of a large region. With just a thought from Tetragon, the Emperor's purple chi covered a large area of this place, and the power of the King of Dixian was undoubtedly revealed. It was just that, this purple chi had shrouded the sky over this extremely cold place for a long time, but no change was found. Half an hour later, Tetragon slowly shook his head and said, no, I can't find it at all. During this period, Wang Lu also launched the array on the top of the giant divine weapon and brought out a huge round plate with a diameter of more than 300 meters. It was like a pot lid and floated above his head, constantly rotating and emitting invisible waves to the surroundings. However, after some twists and turns, there was still no result. Wang Lu could not help but scold, "Are all the fallen immortals so cowardly?" Tetragon sighed and said, "They boast that they are the immortals in the upper realm. They have always been arrogant and regard everything in the lower realm as ants. How could they be afraid of us?" However, after Sun Buping led us to a few victories, they had to become a lot more careful. However, in the end, they still can't change their arrogant nature. Like today, we have already come to their door, but they still avoided us. Each of them is a big problem. After a pause, Tetragon said, "Encountering such an opponent, we were too reckless today. We rashly exposed our cards, but we couldn't even catch the trace of the opponent. After that, the enemy is in the dark while we are in the light. When he recovers his strength, trouble will come." Wang Lu pondered and said, "When he came to 9 regions from the fallen immortal world, the laws of heaven and earth and so on should have earth-shaking changes. If he wants to recover his strength, it can't be done silently, right?" Tetragon said, "That's impossible. Even though when a cultivator reaches the peak of cultivation, the whole body is overflowing with immortal spirit and can be self-generated, the existence of the fallen immortal is, after all, an alien species in 9 regions. The surrounding spiritual energy and even the laws of the great Tao will faintly reject them. For cultivators who can touch the laws, the existence of the fallen immortal is very strong and can't be hidden. There are so many fallen immortals, is there no exception? Although I haven't seen through the last level of the immortal path, but Sun Buping said so. So that's how it is." If even Sun Buping said the same thing, then it was mostly right. After all, he was a fallen immortal, so he couldn't even make a mistake in this kind of basic common sense. Since the other party can't recover his strength silently, then we can't find him now. Wang Lu said and then sneered, "It seems that someone is helping him hide his tracks." This inference surprised Tetragon. Someone is helping him? Black? It's not black. Chapter 765. I'm warning you, if you kill me, you'll regret it. Regret? Ha 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 ha. What a joke. When have I ever regretted anything? Whether it was tricking Lu Li into eating a lollipop or stealing senior brother's golden seal, I've always done things with a clear mind. I don't regret or feel guilty. This is called carefree. I say, Xiao Wu, your words don't have any sense of carefree heroism. Instead, you've lost all your moral integrity. I won't regret it even if I lose all my moral integrity, Wang Wu said coldly and turned to look at the person who spoke first, or rather, the dog. In the warm hut, a big black dog was hung upside down from the beam with a rope. Next to it were scissors to cut open its belly and hot water to clean its fur and water. It was time to sharpen the knife. The black dog's life was hanging by a thread, but it didn't panic like an ordinary animal. Instead, it spoke calmly, "If you kill me, you'll regret it." This sentence indeed saved the dog's life. Although the 2 women in the hut were not afraid of a dog, they were surprised by its abnormal behavior and were ready to listen to what it had to say. However, the black dog was silent. After a long time, it turned its head and impatiently urged, "Let me go, what are you waiting for?" Wang Wu was so angry that she laughed. This dog is so arrogant. Xiao Qi, let's deal with this animal. Get the dog's penis first. As she spoke, she came over to cut open its belly with the scissors. Her murderous look was not fake. The big black dog was shocked. Did this woman have any eyesight? No matter how he thought about it, it couldn't be an ordinary beast that could say something like that. At the very least, it might be some kind of spiritual type beast, and at the very least, it was even more impressive. Perhaps the owner of this dog was a mighty figure. Why did this woman act so recklessly? Did she really want to kill it? And from the looks of it, these 2 women didn't kill the dog for anything else, it was purely to satisfy their appetite. For a mouthful of dog meat, they didn't care about anything else. Was there something wrong with their brains? This Wang Wu was indeed one of the weirdos in the 9 regions. Black was deliberately acting mysterious because it did not want to expose its identity. Because if its identity was exposed, it would probably die a worse death than Black Dog. It was able to form an alliance with Luo Xiao because Luo Xiao had already betrayed the Wanxian League and was considered a rebel. However, although Wang Wu was a weirdo, she had always been on the side of the Wanxian League, so it was difficult to convince her. But now that his life was at stake, Black had no other choice. Back then, in order to evade Kanglan's targeting and to gain Luo Xiao's trust, he didn't hesitate to destroy all of his supernatural powers and transform into a big black dog. Now that he was knocked out by someone, he really didn't have the slightest chance to resist. I'm black. We know what color you are, we're not blind. Wang Wu angrily kicked him, which dislocated Black's internal organs. After kicking him, Wang Wu still had a smile on her face. I can help this animal to improve its blood circulation. I don't know if it will taste better. You can't eat me. I'm black. Dog, you talk a lot of nonsense. If you're not black, can you be white? If you're not black, Shao Qi won't bother to catch you. Shao Qi, while preparing the sauce for cooking the dog meat, shook his head and said, 1 black, 2 yellow, 3 flowers, and 4 white, this makes sense. The big black dog was really anxious. While vomiting dog blood, he struggled and said, I'm Dixian. Then I'm a fairy immortal. Wang Wu laughed, but halfway through her laughter, she suddenly stopped. Then she stretched out her hand and released an invisible force that turned the big black dog's head and tail upside down. After looking at it carefully, she asked in disbelief, You're black? It's me. F***ck. Wang Wu was startled. She immediately put down the big black dog and took a few steps back. The big black dog suddenly swung under the beam like a swing. He was dripping with dog blood and looked very embarrassed. How did you turn into a dog? Did someone add a magical beauty mole to your body? Wang Wu said and began to sneer, and her murderous intent appeared. This time, it was not the killing intent of slaughtering a chicken or a dog, but the killing intent of overflowing true yuan and the impending war. Although she didn't know what Black was doing, turning himself into a big black dog that could be eaten alive, he was, after all, the running dog of the fallen immortal that almost destroyed the entire city of immortals. If it weren't for Wang Lu and Faceless One, perhaps there would still be no solution to the strange poison of the fallen immortal. At the same time, Black knew that if there was any concealment at this time, it would be a dead end, so he immediately told the whole situation. The fallen immortal has arrived. What? Upon hearing this sentence, Wang Wu and Shao Qi were surprised. Black secretly sneered, thinking that he had made the right bet. At this time, it would be difficult to shake the other party's mind with any other nonsense. Only the fallen immortal was a problem that no one could ignore. The one who came is called Kanglan Immortal. He was a very strong person among the fallen immortals in the past. In the past, he could also gain the upper hand in the fight against the top 3 people of Dixian. But he has a weakness, and I happen to know it. Black was still straightforward and pointed out his own value in a few words. Shao Qi shook his head and said, You're the running dog of the fallen immortal, so it's not surprising that you know some secrets of the fallen immortal. But what does it have to do with us? I have betrayed the fallen immortal, and now I have no way to go. I can only stand on the same side as you for the time being. Wang Wu sneered and said, When you're in our hands, you betray your master and have no way to go. Do you think we also have a dog's brain? If I didn't betray my master and have no way to go, how could I be so absurd as to be captured by you? This sentence was somewhat convincing. As the top person in Dixian and the number 1 running dog of the fallen immortal in 9 regions, the strength of Black was obvious to all. Although Wang Wu was not afraid of it, she did not dare to say that she could easily defeat it, let alone capture it alive. No matter what happened before, I'm on your side now. Black said, and no matter how much you want to pursue my past crimes, now we all have a common enemy. Even if we want to settle accounts, we should wait until after autumn. After saying this, Wang Wu and Xiaoqi gradually restrained their killing intent. They looked at each other in silence. After a while, Wang Wu said, "You just said that you know the weakness of Kanglan? This is also the trump card that you rely on to save your life, right?" Black didn't answer directly, but said, "I know you want to kill me, but I'll say it again. If you kill me, you will regret it." "Okay, then I won't kill you." Wang Wu smiled and reached out to cut off the rope that tied the dog. The big black dog fell to the ground with a thud, and its nose was bleeding. However, it got up and shook its fur, but its demeanor did not seem particularly embarrassed. However, the next moment, the dog's leg turned red, and a sharp pain came into Black's brain, which made it tremble involuntarily. Looking back, it saw that Wang Wu was holding a kitchen knife and had already cut off a piece of meat from its thigh. "You." Wang Wu sneered and said, "You can avoid the death penalty, but you can't escape punishment. In any case, your useful place is nothing more than your head, and the other parts are just ordinary dog meat. It's rare for us sisters to set up such a dog meat hotpot stall, so don't waste it." Black endured the pain and said, "Aren't you afraid that what's there to be afraid of? I know you're not afraid of death, and you won't give up the dignity of the dignified Dixian to be a dog. And people who are afraid of death should not be afraid of suffering, right?" Xiaoqi also sneered. At this time, her smile looked 80 to 90% similar to Wang Wu's. "You spread strange poisons in the city of immortals and killed cultivators from all walks of life. Your hands are extremely murderous. Do you really think that we will spare you just because of a few words from you? Later, Xiaoqi and I will set up a dog meat stall. Before we eat and drink enough, you'd better say everything that needs to be said. Otherwise..." Although the fallen immortal is tricky, it's not more tricky than a fallen immortal plus a fallen immortal dog. If we can't make good use of our power, we'd rather not have it. Black was silent. This Wang Wu was even more absurd than the rumors, but when she was serious, she was far more powerful than the rumors. However, there was one thing that she was right about. People who were afraid of death were indeed not afraid of suffering. I'll start from the beginning. The thing is, after a short period of hustle and bustle, the land of the far north once again regained its deathly silence. The indomitable giant and the purple cloud around the giant had disappeared, leaving only a broken glacier and frozen earth. Suddenly, the outline of a tall iceberg standing on the frozen earth twisted and began to shrink rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it shrank into a tall figure. It was a thin man in a blue gown. The gown was shining, and the blue color was as profound as the sea and the sky. However, the man's face was violent, which contrasted sharply with the brilliance of his whole body. "Damn it, you two ants dare to provoke us. In the future, I will peel off your skin and pull out your tendons." With that, as if to vent his anger, he waved his fist to the side silently. However, there was a sound of a landslide in the distance, and a large piece of iceberg collapsed and cracked. However, after breaking, it did not roll down, but was sucked in. Gravel and ice mixed together, from slow to fast, and finally flew towards the man like a whistling meteorite. However, halfway through, it rapidly shrank. When it neared the man, it was already as small as fine sand. It was all grasped in the man's palm, and then disappeared without a trace. After this grasp, there were forever fewer icebergs in the north. The man's expression softened a little, and then he revealed a mocking smile. "Although this land is lowly, it tastes good. It seems that as long as I concentrate on gathering the luck here, I can restore my strength to the bottom line in 7 or 8 days. Even if it's the bottom line, it's enough to move unhindered in this world." With that, he moved his feet, and suddenly the earth surged like waves. There was a loud buzzing sound within a radius of 100 miles. After an unknown amount of time, the man nodded, and the earth stopped shaking. At this time, the ground within a radius of 100 miles was reduced by more than 10 feet. Chapter 766. Phew, the taste is indeed different. In the narrow room, Wang Wu sighed and then looked at the messy cups and plates on the table in front of her. Her smile was slightly bitter. The big black dog meat that Xiaoqi cared about was indeed extraordinary, delicious, and very unique. How could the dog meat of the dignified Dixian not taste unique? It was only by following Xiaoqi that she had the opportunity to eat such a good meat. Although Wang Wu was not as greedy as Xiaoqi, she was usually not bad at wine, women, avarice, and temper. She was also a glutton. This food was definitely a surprise. However, she was not happy. Because the joy of enjoying the food could no longer be shared. Instead, it added a sense of melancholy at the time of parting. Looking at the empty chair across the table, Wang Wu's heart was slightly suffocated. She never regretted doing things and never felt guilty, but it did not mean that she would never feel sad and could always smile. After a long silence, she picked up the wine glass, toasted the empty seat across from her, and then drank the wine in one gulp. Next. I'll go meet that visitor from the outer space. I'll use his head as a farewell to you. With that, Wang Wu threw the wine glass on the table and stepped forward. The next moment, she disappeared without a trace. At this moment, a big black dog with 4 broken limbs raised its head at the side of the table, its body a mess of flesh and blood. She actually went? What a big courage, just a mere king pill. Even if she's an outsider, her courage is too big. What on earth is she relying on? While thinking about it, the door of the room suddenly opened and a bald man quietly came in. When he saw the messy cups and plates on the table and the bloody big black dog on the ground, he could not help but laugh. Black, oh Black, your tragic appearance makes me distressed. Once upon a time, you were an all-powerful figure in the city of immortals, but now you've actually fallen to this. It really makes people laugh until their liver hurts. Speaking of which, how does it feel to be cut alive? Black naturally ignored this kind of provocation. He just frowned and said, "Where have you been? Where else can I go? Of course, I fled. Fortunately, I was alert enough. Although I didn't recognize them when I was drugged, I subconsciously changed my appearance. Plus, they didn't guard against me. If I were caught like you, I'm afraid I would not be able to escape the fate of being cut alive." Luo Xiao shook his head, stepped forward, and stuffed a golden pill into the black dog's mouth. A moment later, the wound on the black dog began to heal slowly. However, Luo Xiao frowned and said, "How come the effect is so slow? This restoring spirit pill is for cultivators. For you, native dog, king black dog, king, and dragon, Li, it." The dog sneered and said, "It's just the diminishing effect of the medicine. Why are you making such a fuss? In order to continue to cut my flesh, those 2 people kept feeding me healing pills. I've eaten no less than 100 of these restoring spirit pills in your hand. Of course, it has no effect now. Don't worry about me, I won't die. Those 2 people have spared my life. Please don't get me wrong, I'm not worried about you at all. You brought this upon yourself. I can only gloat over your misfortune." Luo Xiao said with a smile, "The point is, since they can even let go of such a heinous person like you, then they shouldn't care about what I, a little baldy, have done, right? If I think about it carefully, it's nothing more than murdering my master. But, that's actually a tacit understanding. Shizhou Jin deliberately sent me to kill him. If I don't do it, wouldn't I be letting him down? On the contrary, taking you down is a great credit." Then, Luo Xiao asked, "Then what about them?" "One of them left early and disappeared. The other one just left to find trouble with the fallen immortals." "What a big nerve!" Luo Xiao exclaimed, "What is the origin of the number 1 king pill in 9 regions? Why do I feel that she's even more shameless than Daoist he too? Even Kuchin of the royal soldier sect wouldn't dare to easily deal with the fallen immortals, right?" With that, Luo Xiao looked at the wine pot on the table and said, "Is Wang Wu drunk?" "She drank a lot, but she's very sober. I'm afraid she's really sure. I really underestimated her before. I always thought that she was at most a supreme. But now, it seems that she's bottomless." With that, Black's eyes sank. But the Kanglan immortal is not so easy to deal with. Our plan needs to be adjusted as soon as possible. What the hell is this place? In the extremely cold place, Wang Wu stood on her flying sword in the sky. Being blown by the cold wind, she couldn't help but shiver. This wind. When did it become so strong? Wang Wu's non-phase method could be said to be unparalleled in the world in terms of defensive ability. Even without the non-phase sword defense, her jade mansion and body were far more tenacious than imagined. Neither cold nor heat could invade her, and no poison could invade her. However, just now, a gust of cold wind made her shiver, which showed how heavy the chill was. If it were an ordinary king pill cultivator, her jade mansion would have been frozen and her body would have collapsed. The extreme north was a dangerous place in 9 regions. Under the extreme cold, all living things would die. This was the common sense that everyone in the immortal cultivation world knew. However, for tens of thousands of years, there were actually countless cultivators who dared to break into this dangerous place, so they had a deep understanding of this area. It was not the first time for Wang Wu to come here, so she knew very well that the wind here should not be so cold. At least, before going deep into some real dangerous place, the wind in the north would still leave some leeway. Now, this bone-chilling wind made people feel as if they had gone deep into some nodes of the surrounding spiritual energy, and the climate had become extreme. Looking up, the stars in the north were dim. The positions of several main stars had impressively changed, and the astronomical phenomenon was also completely chaotic. Sure enough, an evildoer has come, even the astronomical phenomenon is chaotic. Wang Wu muttered to herself, looking at the light of the stars, and gradually lost in thought. The North Star is swaying and moving northward. This is the sign of Earth splitting. Hey, why is there another North Star here? Then what is this one that I recognize now? Big Dipper? No, the Big Dipper is obviously over there. Hey, is that the Sirius Star? But what about the ones around it? Forget it, I don't recognize it. In any case, it's chaotic. Wang Wu shook her head and gave up doing something that she was not good at. When the fallen immortal came, it was normal for there to be a worldly phenomenon. Moreover, she was not good at astronomy, so she wanted to infer more information from the movement of the stars. Of course, she was not very good at geography. Compared with a certain talented and knowledgeable senior brother, her knowledge was really weak. However, relatively speaking, she also had her own advantages. She had more than 160 years of accumulation. Over the years, she had traveled all over the country and seen too much. Although very few people came to the bitter and cold land in the extreme north, she had been here in the past and even explored it. However, when she linked what she saw in front of her with the memories of that year, she was surprised to find that, what is this place? Several landmark towering mountains were still there, but the corresponding large glacier had disappeared without a trace. Moreover, according to the location of the mountains, the place where she was at should also be a high ground, not a large basin that had sunk hundreds of meters deep like it was now. The terrain is also chaotic, and the surrounding spiritual energy is exhausted. Wang Wu took a gentle breath and confirmed her judgment. It really is the work of the fallen immortal, cutting off the providence of 9 regions for their own use. It seems that what the black dog said is right. He should have lost a lot of power when passing through the passage, so if I want to kill you, I have to do it secretly. After a sinister smile, a blood-stained sword tip appeared on Wang Wu's chest. Behind her, a cold figure slowly emerged. How dare you? I didn't kill you, but you bastards dare to come to my door. Do you think you can hide from me just because you cultivate the outside path? Insignificant skill, not worth mentioning. With that, the man swung his sword, trying to shake off the corpse on the sword. However, he found that the sword was heavy, as if it was pressed by a mountain. No. It was more than a mountain. With the strength of his wrist, even if there was a mountain, it would be overturned. However, at this time, he felt that the sword was getting heavier and heavier, which actually made the sword bent. He saw that the woman whose chest was pierced by the sword was holding the tip of the sword and twisting her body backward. Her smiling face was stained with blood, which was indescribably ferocious. "I've finally tricked you out, you treacherous villain. Kanglan, if you have any last words, say them and let me have some fun." Kanglan was shocked and furious. His sneak attack just now was not ordinary. Seriously injuring the body was secondary, the key point was that it had shattered the opponent's king pill. Although she was an outside path cultivator, her cultivation still revolved around the king pill. It was just that the efficiency of using it was extremely high, unlike the ordinary king pill. However, the king pill had shattered, and her cultivation was finished. So, where did she get the strength to hold the immortal sword? The king pill had been shattered, so why didn't she die? Kanglan was shocked and furious, but his movements were also extremely fast. He put down the sword in his hand without hesitation, and his body became transparent. If he missed his target in one strike, he would flee. This was Kanglan's favorite way of fighting. Even if his strength was far superior to his opponent, he would not waste any energy to engage in a head-on fight. What's more, this time, his opponent was not only an inexplicable outside path female cultivator, he still clearly remembered the huge puppet that came here half a day ago, and the purple cloud around the puppet. At that time, he had just finished his arrival. Although it was the time when his power was the weakest, it was also the time when his heart was the highest. In his view, when he came from the upper realm to this weak and lowly 9 regions, even if his power was not fully restored, so what? Who here could stop his supreme immortal method? Then, when the giant divine weapon came, he clearly heard his intuition warning him that he must not fight. If he fought, he would be defeated, and if he lost, he would die. If he died, it would delay the great plan of the upper realm's arrival. Kanglan never thought that there was such a tyrannical existence in today's 9 regions, which actually forced him to retreat and hide. After that, he spent half a day plundering the province of the polar region and quickly restored his strength. He boasted that he could beat the giant divine weapon, but even if he won, he would have to pay a big price. If he was attacked by the two at the same time, it would be a real headache. Therefore, he decided to retreat, even if this decision made him mad and his immortal heart was about to burst. However, when Kanglan took a step back, he felt that an invisible force stopped him. It was a circular sword defense with a radius of about 30 meters, which isolated the inside and outside, and could not be entered or exited. Want to run? It's not that easy. In front of him, Wang Wu grinned and pulled out the whole sword from her chest, revealing a big bloody hole in her chest, but she didn't care. "I've waited for 160 years, and finally, I've waited for this opportunity to kill the fallen immortal and avenge my brothers and sisters. Thanks to Satsujinki's continuous red, it's so gorgeous. Look at me on the weekend." Chapter 767. Boom! On the snowy tundra, the earth quaked and the mountains shook. The 10,000 years thick glacier cracked with a loud rumble and crushed stones rolled down. At the center of the shock was a several hundred feet deep pit. The 10,000 years old mysterious ice was harder than steel, but at this time, it was deeply sunken. In the center, Kanglan Immortal knelt on one knee, his face full of anger. "You madman!" The next moment, a golden ball of light fell from the sky like lightning and blasted straight at the top of Kanglan's head. This immortal with infinite magical ability cursed, but he couldn't avoid it. He was smashed down more than 100 feet deep. Moreover, he knelt on one knee, no longer able to maintain his standing posture. In the deep pit, the white jade-like mysterious ice was full of red blood, but it was not Kanglan's blood, ha 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 ha. Accompanied by Wang Wu's wild laughter, the skies seemed to be raining blood. The pitter-patter poured out a blood-red pattern in the deep pit. It was the blood that flowed from the wound on her chest. She was plotted against by Kanglan. Her chest was pierced by a sword, and the wound could not be healed. The body that had been tempered by non-phase methods should be best at recovery and defense. However, the immortal sword used by Kanglan was not a small matter. The slaughter sword extinguished the vitality of all living things. Even if it was a flood dragon, once it was cut by the slaughter sword, it would bleed and lose its vitality. Not to mention that Wang Wu's heart and King Pill were pierced by the opponent's full-strength sword, which was clearly a fatal injury that should have killed her long ago. However, at this time, Wang Wu stubbornly endured the fatal injury and crazily fought with Kanglin. Run, don't you like to run? You can run out of my 30 feet sword defense, but there's still my heaven and earth sword defense. If you can run out of it, I'll consider you capable. Wang Wu laughed wildly and brandished the immortal sword in her hand. Once again, she weaved a golden ball of light and swooped down on Kanglin. What bullsh *T heaven earth sword defense? Kanglin gnashed his teeth, his eyes bloodshot. Previously, he had used an immortal spirit talisman to forcefully open up space and escape from Wang Wu's sword defense. However, he did not expect that this would fall into his opponent's trap. The moment he left the sword defense, Wang Wu controlled the sword defense with a radius of 300 feet and rushed towards him like a comet. Upon contact, Kanglin's body shook violently, and he almost vomited blood on the spot. His opponent did not use any flashy techniques, nor did he possess any profound immortal Tao laws. He was purely relying on brute force to charge forward. However, his strength was unbelievably great, and his speed was so fast that it made one's scalp go numb. The most detestable thing was that no matter what kind of divine ability he used to escape, he would be locked on at the first moment, caught up to, and tangled with. Kanglin actually thought of using the great teleportation technique to fly directly to another corner of 9 regions. However, thinking of the giant divine weapon that had retreated in advance, he did not dare to leave the polar snowfield without authorization. Only in this land where he had plundered the providence could he really use. If it were any other place, it would be very difficult for him to use it as he wished, which was tantamount to losing the geographical advantage. Boom! After another collision, the ground under Kanglin's feet completely cracked open, revealing a gully that led to an endless abyss. This was because he had completely dispersed the huge force on top of his head to the ground under his feet. However, even so, his whole body still felt slightly numb. The brute force of the opponent was simply incredible. He was an immortal. Even if his current state was only 30 to 40% of his peak, it was still far better than any creature on this lowly continent. Whether it was the quality of the immortal spirit or the toughness of the body, the immortal realm had already surpassed the understanding of the mortal world. However, at this moment, he was actually suppressed by the brute force of an ordinary person from 9 regions. You're crazy. Kanglin Immortal clenched his fists to dispel the numbness in his body. Although he was angry about his current disadvantage, he was not afraid. Because although he was in a difficult situation, how could the opponent be better than him? The woman in front of him seemed to have the upper hand, but her white robe had already been soaked with blood. Under the endless brute force collision, every time the recoil force hurt her, the injury became more serious. The muscles all over the woman's body were torn, and blood gushed out from everywhere. Her 2 arms were bent unnaturally, and the bones had long been broken. In a fight between cultivators, there was rarely such a tragic scene. However, at this point, her madness was still undiminished. She flew up to the sky while laughing, and then swooped down again. Holding the sword with both hands, she fiercely collided with Kanglin. This time, Wang Wu's entire left hand flew out. The broken bone and torn muscle could be clearly seen. Her right hand was black and purple, which seemed to be completely necrotic. You're crazy. On the other side, it was also not easy. Kanglin clearly felt that the providence of 9 regions that he had gathered with great difficulty had been scattered a little. However, a madman was still a madman. After several rounds of collision, although Kanglin had suffered some injuries, they were not serious injuries. However, how could the opposite side only suffer injuries? Looking at her increasingly dim eyes, Kanglin knew that she was like a dried-up oil lamp. Therefore, he sneered, stretched his numb wrist, and then pulled out a thin sword from his sleeve, intending to step forward and give her a quick death. However, at this time, he suddenly heard a crisp sound of bones twisting and colliding. Wang Wu was like a marionette, controlled by an invisible force. Every twisted part of her limbs was forcibly corrected, and the joints twisted and burst. Her left arm that had just been cut off recovered at an astonishing speed. In her jade mansion, the broken king pill also glowed with light again. This. Kanglan's eyes widened as he incredulously watched the woman in front of him come back to life. The shock in his heart was like a raging sea. The dead could not be resurrected, this was an iron law that could not be disobeyed in the upper realm. Just now, the woman was obviously a dried-up oil lamp, her vitality was extinguished, but in the blink of an eye, she actually came back to life. This was already like a miracle. The one who just fought with you is Yu. The next one is me. It was still the same body, the same face, but the tone and words were obviously different. This sudden change was simply hair-raising. However, Kanglan had no time to think so much, because the opponent had started a new round of offensive. Her fighting style was completely different from the previous one, but it was still as difficult to deal with. Wang Wu was like a ghost, appearing and disappearing around Kanglan. The golden non-phase sword defense was used as a camouflage prop by her. From time to time, she propped up several sword defenses around the opponent, making it difficult for the opponent to determine her exact position. Then, taking advantage of the flaw revealed by Kanglan, she launched another thunderous blow. This fighting style was also unimaginable. Her strongest defensive sword technique was used as a camouflage illusion, and when she really made her move, she was often exposed outside the protection of the sword defense. This time, Kanglan Immortal spent a lot of effort to cause 2 fatal wounds to Wang Wu. One was to cut off her legs, making her completely lose her mobility. The other was to burn her forehead, which was burned by the heavenly fire. The scorch mark went from the forehead to the back of the head. But soon, Wang Wu came back to life again, with a warm and charming smile on her face. Humph, if I knew that Zhang Miao, that dead-end scholar, was also useless, I'll go next, are you ready? The woman's demeanor was charming, as if she was using her charm skill. However, Kanglan Immortal did not feel his heart at all. Instead, he really experienced the taste of fear. Looking at the blood-soaked woman in front of him, with a red robe, he began to subconsciously want to retreat. This guy, what exactly is her background? Chapter 768. The battle in the extreme north did not last long. However, for Kanglan Immortal, it was really like a year, and every moment was extremely difficult. He had just arrived and absorbed the providence of 9 regions wantonly, so the immortal spirit in his body was unstable, and his condition was not suitable for a protracted battle. It was just that, at that time, he thought how much effort it would take to deal with an outside path cultivator, so he made a thunderous blow. However, he didn't think that although that sword strike seriously injured the opponent, it also made his feet deep in the mud, and he couldn't struggle free. Get out of here. Along with Kanglan's roar, the violent immortal spirit turned into a true word technique and smashed forward. In an instant, Wang Wu's figure flew like lightning toward the snow-covered mountains. The earth quaked and the mountains shook, and the thousands of meters tall mountain broke from the middle. However, Wang Wu's momentum didn't stop. She flew upside down in the air for a long time before she slowly stopped. After being hit by a true immortal-level immortal technique, Wang Wu's condition was so miserable that it was unbearable to look at it. Most of the bones in her body were broken into pieces, and a large piece of flesh on both sides of her waist was scraped off. In the wound, one could even see the pale and cracked spine. Generally speaking, there was almost no other choice for a cultivator to suffer such a serious physical injury. However, Wang Wu just took a deep breath, and these fatal injuries began to heal rapidly. The dim king pill in her jade mansion also began to shine again. Dozens of miles away, Kanglan Immortal's head began to swell with pain again. How many times had this happened? Was this guy really unkillable? Every time he inflicted a fatal injury on her, she would recover quickly, and then, as if she was a different person, she would fight fiercely with a new tactic and immortal method. Even if she didn't care about her life, she still wanted to cause damage to him. From the beginning to the end, she had killed her at least 10 times. The most ferocious time even divided her into 2 parts from her shoulder to her crotch, and her jade mansion was also smashed. However, in just a few breaths, she was brand new. However, this kind of resurrection was obviously limited. There was no immortal person in the world. Even in the immortal world, there were people who lived, grew old, and died. How could someone in a mere 9 regions transcend this reincarnation? Every time she came back to life, she would change her personality. She probably gathered the lives and cultivation of many people together. It looked like a single person, but it was actually an amalgamation of many lives. He wasn't fighting a single person, but a group of people. However, the number of people in this group was limited. If he couldn't kill her 10 times, he would kill her 100 times, or even 1,000 times. But the problem was, firstly, his time was precious and he did not want to waste it on this lunatic. Secondly, if this battle dragged on for too long, it would be troublesome if the giant soldier god was attracted. That was why Kanglan Immortal was having a headache. It seemed like the only thing he could do now was to gather enough power to crush her into powder. However, the side effects of doing so were also great. On one hand, it would disrupt the rhythm of his recovery, and on the other hand, it was very likely to provoke that giant soldier god. The moment of hesitation allowed Wang Wu to smoothly return to normal, but in the next moment, her performance made Kanglan instantly make up his mind. Phew, after resting for so long, it's finally my turn again. Are you ready for a beating, little friend? Ha 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 ha. This arrogant and unrestrained laughter was very familiar. Wasn't it the personality with the shocking brute force at the start of the battle? Hearing this laughter, Kanglan Immortal's heart instantly turned cold. The other party was not dead at all. After each of her personalities was seriously injured, they would take turns to rest. In a short hour, they would recover to their original state. This was a battle of attrition, not a battle of attrition. It seemed like he was the one being exhausted. Although the immortal essences were not fundamentally injured, he could not afford to waste time. After realizing this, Kanglan naturally knew what to do. He took another breath, and this breath scraped an inch of the ground within a radius of 100 miles. Then, he spat it out again. Instantly, the sky was filled with sparkling crystals, as bright as the stars. But in this magnificent scene, there was endless murderous intent. The true immortal's breath was unimaginably cold. This breath of cold air was like a long spear and a sharp sword. In one breath, it pushed forward 100 miles of ice. Although Wang Wu was tens of miles away, she was instantly enveloped by this cold air and completely stopped moving. Kanglan waited for a moment. After making sure that his opponent could not move anymore, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. That breath of cold air just now had used his original strength. In a situation where he had just descended, his strength was greatly depleted. In fact, it was a little painful. But to be able to solve this problem, it was worth it. However, just as he heaved a sigh of relief, he heard an ear-piercing crack. Crack, crack, crack. It was like the cracking of ice. Kanglan was shocked to see that the 100 miles of ice in front of him was actually disintegrating bit by bit. That was the breath of an immortal. Although it was not a complete breath, this breath was enough to linger in this place for 1,000 years. Within 1,000 years, this 100 miles of land would be a land of ice. But in just a few breaths of time, it was already beginning to collapse. Just how strong was the heretic cultivator who was sealed in ice? Could it be that her Tao could offset the Tao of an immortal? Isn't this a little too inconceivable? Kanglan was shocked, but he did not hesitate when he made up his mind. Another breath of cold air was released, completely freezing the 100 miles of long corridor. Both time and space were locked. And this breath of air finally completely immobilized Wang Wu. But Kanglan also felt a wave of fatigue. It was obvious that he was unable to make ends meet. Then he thought about how this battle had already lasted for a full hour. Although he had been deliberately controlling the changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth from the beginning to the end, it was difficult to guarantee that the giant soldier god would not notice it. After dealing with this troublesome woman, the next step was to speed up his recovery. Just as he was thinking, he suddenly felt a sense of danger. Without hesitation, Kanglan released his protective immortal treasure. A misty veil wrapped around him. The veil trembled like rolling waves. Each wave could dissolve the attack of a landslide or tsunami. Layers of waves stacked together, and the defense was impregnable. This was the real trump card that Kanglan had brought with him when he arrived. Previously, when he fought fiercely with Wang Wu for an hour, he did not release the veil even when he was slightly injured several times. But now, in the face of unknown danger, he did not hesitate. The veil had just been released when it was suddenly pierced by a ray of heavenly light. This immortal treasure had a spirit and sensed the danger in advance. In an instant, it trembled violently. Layers of waves stacked up and concentrated on one point of defense. But it still could not withstand the aurora that descended from the sky. The waves were shattered one by one, and the artifact spirit of the veil was forced to show its figure, revealing a painful expression. Fortunately, the veil received support from its master in the next moment. Kanglan Immortal reached out and placed his hand on the veil. Releasing his immortal spirit, he quickly strengthened the veil's defense and repaired the broken waves. The aurora lasted for a moment before it could not continue and slowly disappeared. But Kanglan also felt exhausted, and his wrist was numb. At the same time, on top of the sky, a towering figure released a shocking sense of oppression, making his breathing slightly stagnant. Kanglan clenched his teeth and trembled with hatred. The giant who had forced him to flee in panic had indeed come. Positron cannon. No, how does the pure yang extermination gun taste? Kanglan was silent. Of course, he would not care about his opponent's senseless provocation. But the positron cannon, or the pure yang extermination gun, was indeed an eye-opening killer move. He did not expect that in this despicable world, someone could actually use such a powerful immortal technique. Although it lacked many subtle and exquisite changes, the pure lethality of it still caused him to be horrified. This arrival was indeed not a good task. On the other side, Wang Lu's mood was not as relaxed as he appeared. Tetragon, who was beside him, was even more cautious. Wang Lu, don't be careless. We don't have the upper hand. I know. Taking advantage of the exhaustion of the long battle and hitting him by surprise, we can't cause any effective damage. In terms of strength, he is indeed one level stronger than us. How many more times can you use the positron cannon just now? With the void spirit root, theoretically, I can use it indefinitely. But it takes a long time to charge up each time. I'm afraid he won't give me enough time. I can delay it for you, no need. You are not in good condition now, and your solo combat ability is less than 50% of your peak state. Instead of being wasted as cannon fodder, it's better to support me from inside the giant soldier god. Later, I will release the floating cannon to contain him. Your primordial spirit is far more accurate than mine, so I'll leave the microcontrol to you. Floating cannon? Forget it, you don't have to explain it to me. This giant soldier god was given to you by Sun Buping. You can use it however you want. And I should be able to cooperate with this big guy. Okay. Without saying much, Wang Lu directly activated the mechanism on the back of the giant soldier god. Instantly, thousands of tiny metal balls flew out. Each of them danced nimbly in the air, shooting beams of light at Kanglan Immortal from time to time. Some of these beams of light were full of blazing fire chi, some were cold, and some were simply sharp sword chi. They were all in different shapes and sizes, but they were all extremely lethal. The large metal balls were 3 meters in diameter, and the small ones were only the size of a fist. But in terms of pure destructive power, they were comparable to the attacks of nascent soul or even soul formation cultivators. These thousands of metal balls bombarded down like a storm, and ordinary perfected cultivators would be riddled with holes in an instant. Of course, Kanglan Immortal was not a mere perfected cultivator. In the storm, he unfolded his veil and stood still. But his expression was far from calm. These floating cannons could not break through the veil and hurt him, but they also made it difficult for him to attack the enemy. The storm-like energy output completely disrupted the surrounding spiritual energy, and also disrupted the laws of heaven and earth. It was difficult for his immortal method to work in this environment. Unless he used the move of freezing hundreds of miles at any cost, but that was obviously not worth it. In fact, when he saw the floating cannons all over the sky, Kanglan already had the idea of retreating. This battle was too unfavorable for him. According to his immortal heart calculation, even if he could win this battle, he would at least be in a miserable state, with less than 10 or 20% of his strength left. Although he could kill the thief in front of him to vent his anger, it would also easily delay the important matter. Even though 9 regions was lowly, there was no shortage of strong individuals among the ants. They called themselves Dixian. Although the name was ridiculous, their numbers were also troublesome. If he met a few of the best among the Dixian when he was at his weakest, it would be really troublesome. Thinking of this, Kanglan immediately sprayed out a mouthful of extremely cold air, which froze the surrounding dozens of miles. The floating cannons instantly stopped and could no longer move. Kanglan took this opportunity to launch another immortal method, ready to leave this extremely cold place. However, just as the immortal method was about to take effect, a golden spherical light cover suddenly enveloped him. The next moment, the immortal method was violently disturbed and immediately failed. The power of the immortal spirit backfire made Kanglan feel pain in his chest. Who? Huh? Just now, you were so fierce with me, but you forgot me so quickly. It's really sad. Chapter 769. Haunting lunatic, do you really think I can't kill you? Within the golden sword defense, Kanglan Immortal's anger boiled, and the immortal spirit around him surged endlessly like a torrential tide. The pair of divine eyes of the immortal burst out with blazing red light and infinite divine power, which twisted and stretched the perfectly round sword defense, as if it could break at any time. The sword defense was not broken, but it was already very difficult to support it. Even though it was isolated by the non-phase sword defense, the extremely cold land still trembled because of this incredible surging power. The power of the immortal did not belong to this world, nor would it be bound by the method of this world. Non-phase sword defense was already a top powerful method in 9 regions, but obviously, in the eyes of the fallen immortal, it was still not enough. However, one non-phase method was not enough. 2 non-phase methods, plus a giant divine weapon, made Kanglan Immortal unable to ignore them. He roared in the sword defense, but his immortal heart was as cold as the hundreds of miles long corridor. The situation was really unfavorable to him. A giant divine weapon that could use the pure yang extinction spear was already quite a threat. Coupled with the haunting Wang Wu, in his current state, it was no longer a matter of how much it would cost, but a problem that could not be solved even if he spent more than a price. Through the passage between the 2 worlds, he had to spend more than 80% of his immortal spirit to descend into this world. His less than half a day time was far from enough for him to recover to his fighting state. Using more than 20% of his strength to fight against these reckless people was not his good fighting style. But he had no choice now. Scoundrel, show yourself. The light of the immortal's divine eyes was even brighter, and in an instant, it was as if a new sun was ignited. The narrow space in the golden sword defense was filled with light, and Wang Wu, who was hiding in the shadow, could not hide and was illuminated. However, she was not in a hurry. Because before Kanglan had time to make a move against her, the light of divine punishment from the sky had already descended. The light of the positron cannon was not inferior to the celestial divine eyes. Wang Wu's golden sword defense left a small hole for the positron cannon to descend. Kanglan Immortal immediately dropped Wang Wu and raised his veil. The power of the positron cannon was too strong. If it really landed on his body, there was a risk of serious injury or even death. He still had important things to do. How could he die here? With the light gauze around, Wang Lu's positron cannon couldn't do anything to him. However, in order to block the positron cannon, the light gauze had gathered too much power in one spot. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Wang Wu unceremoniously rushed forward and punched Kanglan with her bare fists while laughing wildly. When the punch was launched, it caused a rumble of thunder. It was the sound of the air within the sword defense being compressed violently. When Wang Wu punched out, the invisible air was compressed by the huge force into a tangible wall of air that was harder than steel. The force was transmitted to Kanglan's back from more than 100 feet away, creating a dazzling golden light. An immortal's entire body was a treasure. The light gauze was a treasure, and the long gown was also a treasure. An ordinary long gown, but when it was attacked, it burst forth with amazing defensive power. Wang Wu's punch had the power to split mountains and rocks, but it could only slightly flatten the folds of the long gown. The next moment, Kanglan Immortal, who had dealt with the positron cannon, turned his head and spat out a mouthful of blazing fire. Wang Wu's golden sword defense was shattered in an instant. It wasn't broken by an external force, but Wang Wu had taken the initiative to release the sword defense. This was because she wanted to escape. Kanglan's true Samadhi fire was too strong. If she still insisted on holding the sword defense, either the sword defense would be melted by the true fire and she would suffer from the backlash, or the fire would roll in the sword defense and she would be burned to ashes. Therefore, at this moment, Wang Wu could only withdraw the sword defense first. Once the sword defense was withdrawn, theoretically, Kanglan would have a chance to escape. However, instead of retreating, he moved forward. His divine sense locked onto Wang Wu, and a mouthful of Samadhi fire chased after her endlessly. In an instant, a sea of fire was sprinkled down. This sea of fire was directed at Wang Wu. It burned in midair and did not land on the ground. However, the residual heat made the ice and snow in the extremely cold land unbearable and began to melt. The glaciers flowed into streams, and the streams converged into rivers. The snowfield melted into lakes and oceans, but they soon evaporated, revealing the bare rock surface. Within a radius of 100 miles, the snowfield evaporated. This was the aftermath of the immortal's true fire. In the encirclement of the true fire, Wang Wu could not remain calm. A sword defense with a radius of less than 10 feet was propped up by her again. This sword defense was much smaller, but its strength was also much higher. Even when surrounded by the true fire, it did not show any sign of loosening. However, this time, in the immortal's divine eyes, she finally saw more things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 15 king pill. Kanglan Immortal finally sucked in a mouthful of cold air. Since his arrival in 9 regions, in just over half a day, he had been surprised many times. However, none of them shook his heart like this. 15 king pill? What was this thing? Yes, it was something. Because no matter what reason was used to explain it, it could not explain how a human body could accommodate so many king pill. This was not a matter of quantity, but a matter of fundamental impossibility. A Yuanying stage cultivator might be 10 times or even 100 times stronger than a king pill cultivator, but it was impossible to stuff 100 king pills into one's body. Moreover, each of them was functioning normally, and they were connected to each other. No matter how strong a man was, he could not grow 10 arms. Those who could grow 10 arms were only monsters. And Wang Wu was such a monster. Kanglan originally thought that she was using the same king pill repeatedly, but now he saw that there was more than one king pill in her body. No wonder she had so many personalities. However, this was even more contrary to common sense and even more terrifying. The fear in Kanglan Immortal's heart began to emerge again. This time, it was not the fear of failing the task, which would delay the great plan, nor the fear of being hurt by these scoundrels. But it was an instinctive fear of the unknown. After not returning to this land for tens of thousands of years, could it already breed monsters? Thus, the color of the true Samadhi fire suddenly changed. Kanglan began to disregard his origin and really put his life on the line. Even if someone would take the opportunity to hurt him, even if the loss of forcibly descending would be difficult to recover, even if it would delay the great plan of the upper realm. He did not care. This person must be eliminated first. The full outbreak of the fallen immortal, even if it was only when they were tired, was not a trivial matter. Even if Wang Wu had 15 king pills, she still could not block it. But naturally, someone could help her block it. Absolute field domain. A golden polygonal shield appeared in front of Wang Wu. The sea of fire stopped in front of the shield, and even the fire could not shine on Wang Wu. Because in front of Wang Wu, there was a mountain-like figure, which cast a shadow that covered the sky. Wang Lu drove the giant divine weapon and finally came to the scene in person. By combining the non-phase method with the defensive immortal method of the giant divine weapon, Wang Lu subconsciously comprehended this unique defensive technique. Wang Wu's non-phase sword defense at this time might not be able to block the true samadhi fire, but Wang Lu's absolute field domain easily blocked it. At the same time, a storm rained down on top of Kanglan's head. Under the control of Tetragon, thousands of floating cannons began to crazily output firepower. These floating cannons were like tickles to Kanglan, who was going all out. They couldn't hurt him, but they could make him look embarrassed. At this time, Kanglan even began to disregard his own life, so he naturally didn't care about being embarrassed or not. He took a step forward and took a deep breath. Thus, all the true samadhi fire was sucked into his abdomen. The hot extreme north began to show a bit of coolness. The next moment, Kanglan opened his mouth and spat out an orange-red fireball. Wang Lu's complexion changed, and he said, F***ck, the immortal skill was really amazing. The true samadhi fire, which could melt the snowfield with its residual heat, was already strong enough, but the immortal's inhalation and exhalation had increased its power several times. This orange-red fireball not only condensed and compressed the sea of fire, but also produced a new change in the process of compression. This was a real small sun. It couldn't be blocked by force, because the absolute field domain was not really absolute. It couldn't escape, because the sun could emit light, and light was infinitely fast. Similarly, it couldn't counterattack, because unless it could reverse the rate of cause and effect, it was impossible to arrive earlier than the light. And the reason why Wang Lu could still have the leisure to think at that moment was that the sun had not really exploded. If it really exploded, it would be an unsolvable situation. But he knew that this sun would not explode, so he just said, F***ck, but he didn't panic. This was because he saw what he wanted to see in this sun. The next moment, Kanglan let out a sneer, operated his primordial spirit, and detonated the sun. It was hard to describe the light and heat that burst out in an instant. The time in the entire northernmost land seemed to stop for a moment, and then it began to continue to flow. After skipping that crucial time, one could see that in the sky above the northernmost land, the fire poured down like a waterfall, and the fire flowed on the ground like a river. Endless light and heat radiated in all directions with this as the center. The northernmost land had a radius of tens of millions of miles, and no one could completely change this piece of land with their own strength. However, seeing the magnificent scene of hundreds of miles melting in the center of the land, people felt that it was only a matter of time before the entire northernmost land was burned. The power of the fallen immortals was so terrifying, but at this time, Kanglan's complexion was very bad. Because although he melted hundreds of miles of ice and snow, he didn't melt the opponent in front of him. The golden polygon, which was hundreds of feet long and wide, was still standing, and the giant divine weapon and the outer path evildoer behind the shield were still alive and kicking. Why? The explosion just now should have broken the shield and incinerated the two people behind it. Even if he was very weak at this time and still had injuries on his body, he would never miscalculate the lethality of the immortal method. The people who should have died did not die. Kanglan was naturally puzzled, but soon he saw a trace of abnormality. The immortal divine eyes looked around, and he clearly saw that the ground under his feet, after the snow cover melted, revealed the scorched surface, and the surface seemed to be shining with a layer of soft light that did not belong to this place. The immortal's divine sense instantly calculated the cause and effect, and the result came out in an instant. That giant god had once chased after him when he had just arrived. At that time, Kanglan hid himself, and the giant divine weapon couldn't find him, so it had no choice but to leave. At that time, he quietly put poison in the northernmost land. When Kanglan absorbed the providence of the northernmost land and integrated it into his body, the poison also lurked in his body. When he didn't use it, everything was normal, but when he encountered an emergency and didn't hesitate to use all his strength, the poison would completely break out. First, it disintegrated Kanglan's true samadhi fire. Secondly, there were signs of instability in Kanglan's body. Being able to damage an immortal, this was indeed a strange poison. It was a strange poison called Holy Light. Chapter 770. Sure enough, you're a shameless person. Kanglan Immortal's voice was no longer as furious as before. Instead, it became calm. At this point, anger could no longer solve the problem, so he had no intention to continue to be angry. Even if he had enough reason to be angry. Because even Tetragon was in a state of shock and anger at this time. Wang Lu, how dare you? Do you know that you? Of course I know. Wang Lu interrupted him unceremoniously. In today's 9 regions, who could have a deeper understanding of Holy Light than Wang Lu? As the master of Holy Light, how could he not understand the consequences of burying Holy Light in the providence of 9 regions as a poison? The introduction of the seed of power of a foreign continent into the providence of 9 regions would cause a fundamental change in the nature of the land. This behavior was generally called colonization. Dividing the territory was one of the biggest damages to 9 regions. The land of extreme cold was an ownerless land, so it was very easy for it to be divided. However, for tens of thousands of years, no one had ever dared to do so. But so what? Gem, are you out of your mind? Can't you tell the difference? When the fallen immortal came, the entire 9 regions would be fragmented. Compared with that, what was a colony? Of course, Tetragon understood this truth, but it didn't mean that she could accept it easily. Gem, figure it out, Holy Light is my holy light. Where I am, Holy Light is there, and this separated land belongs to that place. With that, Wang Lu no longer paid attention to Tetragon, but focused all his attention on Kanglan. The opponent was the fallen immortal, so he could not be afraid of him, but he could not ignore him. The poison of Holy Light could disintegrate his fireball, but it could not disintegrate his existence. Now, the poison of Holy Light had indeed spread to his body, but with Kanglan's strength, it was easy for him to dispel the Holy Light. The poison tactic gave him some advantages, but overall, it was still a stalemate. The fallen immortals had a very deep foundation, so it was impossible for them to be suppressed so easily. If Kanglan had risked his life, he would have been able to shoot 10 of those sun-like fireballs, but Wang Lu did not have the ability to shoot 9 suns in a row. However, being able to fight fiercely with him until now meant that they had achieved their strategic goal. Wang Lu smiled and manipulated the giant god to make humming sounds. Senior, your mystical techniques are truly admirable. If we were to fight one-on-one, none of us would be able to last more than 3 moves from you. Therefore, we can only fight you by outnumbering you. I hope you won't mind. So what if there are so many of you rats? Kanglan sneered, and all the holy light in his body had been squeezed out by him. At the same time, 3 orange-red fireballs appeared around him. As he stepped on the 9 regions map, this immortal treasure that controlled the 9 regions suddenly came to life as if it had the finishing touch. The light grating that ran through the sky and the earth disappeared, but it merely became invisible. Instead, the force that bound the battlefield increased exponentially. Feng Yin's step completely activated the array, activating all the magical abilities and the great Tao contained in the 9 regions map. Senior, you just said that you don't mind fighting with many, so I can call a few reinforcements here, right? As Wang Lu said, he put away the absolute domain and lifted the weapon in his right hand. It was a slender cannon that stretched for several miles, and the muzzle was aimed at Kanglan. Kanglan Immortal was silent for a moment, and then suddenly laughed. Ha, hee hee, ha 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 ha. Fighting with many? What a joke. Trash like you, I'll kill as many as you come. While speaking, the 3 small suns rushed into the sky at the same time and hit the 9 regions map. The protective veil suddenly expanded and swept toward Wang Lu. Then, he disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. The tribulation thunder that fell from the 9 regions map accurately hit the 3 fireballs and detonated them in midair. However, the destructive attribute of the tribulation thunder completely wiped out the remaining power of the explosion, which made the immortal's killer move completely fail. The giant divine weapon driven by Wang Lu seemed to be cumbersome, but it burst out with amazing agility. In an instant, it flashed thousands of times within a radius of 100 miles, which made the immortal treasure veil unable to catch it, and no matter how many magical abilities it had, it couldn't be used. The next moment, a strong light suddenly broke out over the snowfield thousands of miles away. Thousands of crisscrossing light gratings suddenly appeared in the air, flickering and slightly deformed under the impact of an invisible force. It was the light grating of the 9 regions map that locked the battlefield. Above the sky, Hichu Daoran shook his body slightly and let out a muffled groan. Supreme Kuchin took a step forward, and the battle flag heavily landed on the ground. The flag fluttered, summoning the projection of hundreds of millions of magical weapons to kill the distance. Supreme Juri pressed his hands down, which was not easy to maintain the integrity of the 9 regions map. Supreme Tianluan frowned, pinched the ring on his right index finger, and slowly rotated it. The light grating thousands of miles away gradually stabilized with the rotation of the ring. Finally, Feng Yin Daoist master closed his right eye and saw things with his left eye. He suddenly turned around and swung his stellar sword horizontally toward Hichu Daoran. This sword was extremely fast. Before anyone could react in time, it was less than 3 feet away from Hichu Daoran. At this distance, even if the 4 supremes surrounded him, no one could stop Feng Yin's sword. However, the immortal sword stopped 3 feet away. Bastard! Kanglin Immortal glared angrily and showed his figure from the void. He was between the tip of Feng Yin's sword and Hichu Daoran. His 2 palms were forced to close together, sandwiching the immortal sword in Feng Yin's hand. It turned out that the Samadhi true fire was fake, the light gauze cage was fake, and the surprise attack thousands of miles away was also fake. The real purpose of Kanglin Immortal was to counterattack and directly attack the root of the problem. This move was extremely fast, but it was seen through by Feng Yin Daoist master at the critical moment. His sword crossed the sky and cut out an impossible gap, blocking Kanglin Immortal's sneak attack. However, the power of a single person was still lacking. Kanglin Immortal clamped the immortal sword with both hands. One hand turned into yang, condensing the high temperature that could burn mountains and boil seas, and the other hand turned into yin, condensing the cold that could freeze time and space. In an instant, the cold and hot intertwined, causing the immortal sword to break in pain. Get out of here! With a roar, Kanglin held the broken immortal sword with both hands and thrust it forward. Feng Yin was suddenly unable to hold on and was hit in the chest by the hilt of the sword. He flew backward for more than 100 miles, and his blood spilled into the sky. The next moment, Kanglin Immortal's yin and yang hands slapped toward Hichu Daoran. There was no longer any obstacle between the two. At the critical moment, Hichu Daoran's toes touched the 9 regions map. In an instant, the 9 regions map was magnified thousands of times. The several people who gathered together were suddenly separated by thousands of mountains and rivers, completely separated from each other. As for Senior Immortal Kanglin's palm, it also fell into the air. Ha! Kanglin's move failed, but he revealed a smile of success. With a whistling sound, he flew straight up like a sharp arrow, leaving only a small figure in an instant. Not good. He's going to run away. The 5 sect leaders came with the 9 regions map. The 9 regions map was high above the clouds, sealing off the world. However, there was actually an endless sky above the clouds. That was a field that no cultivator could seal off. And there was a whistling astral wind in the 9th sky. The higher the altitude, the more violent the astral wind. So far, no cultivator had been able to explore the strength of the sky. But there was no doubt that as the strongest individual fallen immortal, Kanglin could fly higher than anyone present. At that time, relying on the astral wind in the 9th sky, he could open an insurmountable distance from the others, and the encirclement against him would be meaningless. Unfortunately, although everyone present could realize this problem, they were powerless to stop it. Kanglin Immortal's speed was too fast, faster than anyone present. Once he started, he would not fall behind anyone. Unless someone could start earlier than him. Just when Kanglan was about to break through the sky, he suddenly saw a white figure above his head. That person held up a mountain with one hand. That was Wang Wu. When did she get here? An incredible emotion suddenly welled up in Kanglan's heart. However, before he could think clearly, Wang Wu smashed down the mountain that she was holding. The strength of this landslide was far beyond Kanglan's imagination. At the moment when the boulder hit his face, Kanglan felt that his primordial spirit seemed to be about to leave his body. In a trance, he seemed to see more King Pill in Wang Wu's body. The next moment, he completely lost control of his body and smashed straight to the ground like a meteorite. Boom! In the loud noise, a towering mountain was smashed by him at the waist, and the upper half of the mountain collapsed, revealing a hollow mountainside. Kanglan lay in the rubble of the mountainside and struggled to get up. However, the immortal spirit around his body flowed in reverse, completely not listening to him. He tried several times in succession, but he could not muster up any strength at all. How could that lowly creature from the lower realm cause such serious damage to him? Kanglan found it hard to believe, but in the next moment, he found that there seemed to be an invisible force around him that was constantly absorbing his immortal spirit, making him increasingly weak. Who is it? It's me. In front of Kanglan, a pure black human silhouette appeared. It's you, lowly dog. It's me, but compared to me, you should be more concerned about where this place is, Black said calmly. Then, without waiting for Kanglan to speak, he gave his answer one step ahead. I don't know if you've heard of Hades Mountain, the immortal trap array. You. Please rest here quietly, we'll meet again in 10,000 years. In the next moment, the cracked mountain rocks suddenly began to gather together, completely burying the hollow belly of the mountain, leaving not the slightest gap. And Kanglan's world was completely plunged into darkness. Chapter 771. A towering mountain and an immortal trap array handed down from the Age of Desolation together formed one of the famous dangerous places in 9 regions. Netherworld Mountain, Immortal Trap Array. From ancient times to the present, no one knew how many capable people went deep into this place and then disappeared. The hinterland of Netherworld Mountain was like a ferocious behemoth, which swallowed up all the visitors, leaving no dregs behind. Of course, the more dangerous the place was, the more curious it would be. There would never be a lack of curious and adventurous individuals among the cultivators. The exploration of Netherworld Mountain had never stopped for tens of thousands of years. However, it was conceivable that after tens of thousands of years, no one had really explored the secret of the immortal trap array. Whether it was going deep into it or using immortal method to explore from the outside, in the end, nothing was found. There was once a rough sect that tried to overthrow Netherworld Mountain by violence. As a result, the whole sect was removed from 9 regions overnight, as if it had been cursed. Today is really an eye-opener. I can't believe that even an immortal can be trapped in it. Amazing, really amazing. Outside Netherworld Mountain, Wang Lu piloted the giant divine weapon and floated in mid-air, marveling at the mountain that gradually recovered under his feet. An earth-shattering battle had finally come to an end here. The insufferably arrogant fallen immortal was silent. It was indeed a great Netherworld Mountain and a great immortal trap array. Previously, for the sake of Kanglan Immortal, it could be said that all the strongest people in the continent failed to stop him, and they were even almost penetrated by him. However, in the end, this unremarkable mountain could suppress him, because this Netherworld Mountain immortal trap array perfectly restrains Kanglan. Black's voice passed into Wang Lu's ears. Kanglan is a practical person with rich experience in actual combat among the fallen immortals. Many years of battle have made him almost flawless. But in the end, no one is perfect. He still has a fatal weakness: he is an immortal. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu curiously asked, as an immortal, he has all kinds of privileges that the cultivators in the lower realm can't have. What kind of weakness is this? The immortals in the upper realm are indeed noble, but Netherworld Mountain is a prison set up by the upper realm in the 9 regions during the Great Desolate Age to imprison the exiled immortals. This prison was set up for immortals. Everything was designed to target immortals and use their divine abilities to suppress them. If it was an ordinary cultivator, they might have a chance to escape. But if an immortal enters, they can forget about coming out. Interesting. Wang Lu nodded. However, since even you know about the Abyssal Mountain's immortal trapping formation, and Kanglan is a practical fighter, can you guarantee that he doesn't know about it, and that he won't have any countermeasures? I'm not Kanglan himself, so I can't guarantee anything. But no matter what, this is already the best outcome. Best? I'm afraid not. After all, Kanglan didn't die in battle. He was just suppressed, and I can't be at ease if I can't see him being suppressed like a dead dog by the immortal trapping formation with my own eyes. Wang Lu said, his eyes locked on Black. Who knows what's going on with him inside? Perhaps he's suppressed to the point that he can't move, or perhaps you're colluding with him to put on a show. It looks like he's being suppressed, but in fact, he's hiding in the cave in the mountain, which is warm in winter and cool in summer. When he fully recovers, he'll come out of Netherworld Mountain and slaughter all the dogs in 9 regions. Black shook his head and laughed. Ha ha ha, when did Daoist Master Wang Lu become so suspicious? Wang Lu's voice turned cold. Do I need to confide in a 3-surnamed slave like you? Do you think I'm Luli? With that, the muzzle of the positron cannon that stretched for several miles suddenly aimed at Black. Moreover, in this situation, I can't trust you, and I can't find your value. It's more cost-effective to turn you into experience points, don't you think? I don't think that's a wise choice. In the face of Wang Lu's positron cannon, Black said in a deep voice, a chess piece like me, no matter how much contribution I make, for the people in the upper realm, I'm still a bastard that's not even comparable to a dog. If the plan goes well, I can still eat a few bones. But my plan was disrupted by Luo Xiao halfway and I made an irreparable mistake. Then I have no choice but to defect. Now I'm on the same boat as you. As for the value, I think no one in 9 regions knows the fallen immortal in the upper realm better than me. This unique piece of information is my value. While the two of them were talking, the 9 regions map in the clouds slowly descended, and the 5 sect leaders gathered one after another. Wang Lu temporarily put down Black and turned to salute the 5 people one by one. Just now, in the fierce battle with Kanglan Immortal, thanks to the timely arrival of these 5 supreme-level powerhouses, who symbolized the strongest fighting power in the immortal cultivation world of 9 regions, Kanglan was forced to flee like a cornered dog jumping over a wall. Finally, he revealed a flaw and was taken into the belly of the Netherworld Mountain. There was no prior plan for the whole process. It was the 5 people who sensed that there was a great battle in the extreme north that they rushed here. However, in such a hurry, they had a good tacit understanding with Wang Lu and his disciple in every step. This experience and strength were indeed worthy of respect. The 5 people also heard the dialogue between Wang Lu and Black. Wang Lu, I think he's right. Although this person has committed a crime that can't be redeemed even if he dies 10,000 times, it's undeniable that he does have value. Supreme Jury said, I think it's more beneficial for us to keep him alive. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but feel happy. Supreme Jury was a well-known idealistic bureaucrat in the immortal cultivation world. His nature was indeed not bad, and his strength was also strong enough, but his IQ was really not worthy of the title of the leader of the 5 uniques. Supreme Tianluan said, from an academic point of view, any deduction and calculation must be based on enough intelligence, and our biggest problem now is that we know almost nothing about the fallen immortal. If we can make good use of Black's intelligence, it will be of great benefit to the future battle. But on the other hand, if we get false intelligence, it will be counterproductive, which also needs to be paid attention to. Wang Lu shook his head slightly. Supreme Tianluan said so much, but it was tantamount to saying nothing. The key now was whether Black was trustworthy or not, but Supreme Tianluan was unwilling to make a judgment. Supreme Jury added, in the battle just now, if he didn't launch the immortal trap array in the Netherworld Mountain at the last moment, it would be difficult for us to really suppress the immortals in the upper realm. In this regard, he can be regarded as redeeming his crime with meritorious service. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu sneered and said, "Supreme Jury, are you old and confused? How can you be sure that Kanglan was suppressed? Have you gone in and seen it?" Supreme Jury was not angry, but turned his head and said, "Kuchin, what do you say? I'm not interested in your intrigue." With that, Supreme Kuchin unfolded the battle flag. The flag, as if alive, wrapped Kuchin up, rolled up, and then disappeared without a trace. Kuchin chose to leave early without any sense of responsibility. Jury shook his head helplessly and asked Feng Yin, "Fellow Daoist must be on the side of Wang Lu?" Feng Yin did not hide it and said, "Yes, I support all of Wang Lu's decisions." Jury then turned to Hichu Daoran and asked, "We have already expressed our views, now it's your turn to make a decision." As soon as Daoist Master Hichu was about to speak, someone suddenly interrupted, "I haven't said my point of view yet." Everyone turned their eyes and saw a bald man walking out slowly from the dark shadow. It was Luo Xiao. Seeing Luo Xiao, the expressions of the several supremes were a bit strange. Wang Lu directly moved the muzzle of the cannon, and the light of the positronic convergence shone in the muzzle. This traitor of 9 regions committed the crime of murdering his master for his own selfishness and caused the fall of Shizhou Jin, which could be said to be an unforgivable crime. However, on the other hand, he also made a great contribution by instigating Black and cooperating with others to suppress the fallen immortals. If the merits and demerits were compared, the merits seemed to be more. However, with the precedent of betrayal, Luo Xiao was also not trustworthy. "I know that you probably don't have much trust in me, but there's one thing I think you need to know. Not long ago, when I instigated Black to rebel, he refused to obey. At that time, his plan to strangle Sun Buping failed. In the eyes of the fallen immortals, he was already a dereliction of duty dog. And the fallen immortals have always done things with merit and demerits. So, if he continued to stick to the fallen immortal camp, he would simply bring about his own destruction, so he might as well jump to our side." But at that time, he didn't agree, but said. Before Luo Xiao could finish his words, a dazzling light suddenly burst out in front of him. Wang Lu's positron cannon mercilessly aimed and fired, shooting out a ray of light as thick as an arm. It brushed past Luo Xiao's cheek and burned his eyebrows. However, at the same time, it also blocked a group of shadows that rushed over. "Black, what are you in such a hurry for? He hasn't finished his words. What do you want to do by rushing over? Do you want to kill him?" Upon hearing this, Luo Xiao didn't even look at Black and said with a smile, "Of course, he's in a hurry to kill him. If it weren't for me, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to separate myself from his shadow. Not long ago, when he violently hurt people, I wondered why he did it. Later, after thinking hard in the dark, I finally came up with the answer. He once said that his defection to the fallen immortal side was not for his own selfishness, and then he gave some other messy reasons. But in the end, he still defected, so I didn't think much about it at that time. But later, the more I thought about it, the more I felt it was subtle. If joining the fallen immortal side was not for his own selfishness, what else could it be? Organization interests? Or some lofty ideal? I remember very clearly that at that time, he called the fallen immortal master, and there's no need to mention how intimate and respectful he was. Such a person. Would he really betray the Wanxian League side? To be honest, I don't believe it. Upon hearing this, Black sighed and said, "It seems that you never trusted me from the beginning." "Ha ha ha, trust a 3-surnamed slave like you? Do you think I'm an idiot? Of course, I've never trusted you. It's just that I can't find any clues about you and can't guess your intention. It wasn't until you suddenly plotted against me not long ago, and just now, you tried to kill me, that I completely understood everything." Luo Xiao said, looked up at Wang Lu, and said with a smile, "In short, it's a trick of injuring oneself to gain confidence." Wang Lu also smiled and said, "Yes, it's a trick of injuring oneself to gain confidence." As soon as his voice fell, the firepower of the positron cannon burst out in full force, and a thick beam of light directly penetrated the netherworld mountain. Chapter 772. When he saw Wang Lu slightly turn the muzzle of the cannon, Black's mind was in a trance, and fragments of the past always emerged in his mind. Then, he suddenly remembered a sentence. Life is like a box of chocolates, you never know what you will get. This sentence was first circulated in the port cities of the 9 regions. At that time, chocolate from the western continent had just begun to become popular in 9 regions. The specious production method made the quality of chocolate very unstable. Similarly, a box of chocolate could have thousands of flavors. Therefore, some busybodies used this as a metaphor for life, which was actually quite appropriate. When Black was young, he had heard this sentence. At that time, he was still an ordinary cultivator in a port city. On a narrow island, he joined an immortal cultivation sect that relied on the sea for a living. A foundation establishment master led 7 or 8 chi cultivating stage disciples to fish and practice chi all day long. His days were plain, but there was no lack of fun. His master was a good person. Although he looked fierce, his temperament was actually the most gentle. He was originally a fisherman who lived by the sea. One day, when he saw the sunrise on the sea, his heart was suddenly moved, and just like that, he stepped into the threshold of immortal cultivation. Then, while fishing, he also pondered some secrets of immortal cultivation. He had no master, no resources. Purely relying on his perception and a little interest, he spent 20 years to enter the foundation establishment stage and had some magical abilities. When the surrounding fishermen children saw him, they pestered him to learn, and he taught them everything he knew. For him, immortal cultivation was just a hobby. What he really loved was to sail a boat and cast a net on the sea to catch fish. That was indeed a dream era for immortal cultivators. A fisherman with mediocre aptitude could obtain immortal fate in his daily life and open the path of immortal cultivation. But now, it was absolutely impossible. However, it was such an ordinary fisherman who changed Black's life and also changed the history of the immortal cultivation world. Black followed the fisherman to learn immortal cultivation for several years. His outstanding aptitude soon made him surpass his master. Many times, he, the disciple, had to take care of the master. In this small sect, the master and the disciple laughed and joked with each other, and they didn't care about it. Many times, Black would think, what would happen if that kind of life continued? Would he leave that island one day, bid farewell to his lovely master and fellow apprentices, and go alone to a bigger world, a wider heaven and earth? Black himself couldn't give an answer, because he really couldn't remember what happened more than 10,000 years ago. He only remembered that on that day, a huge storm suddenly arose on the surface of the sea. Huge waves that were hundreds of feet high rose on the usually calm surface of the sea. Dark clouds covered the sky, and there wasn't an inch of time left in the world. Lightning bolts flashed wildly between the clouds, illuminating the pitch-black sponge. The fisherman master, who had lived by the sea for decades, had never seen such a spectacle. His intuition as a cultivator told him that this was not a natural phenomenon. Only a cultivator could cause such a change in the sky and earth. And to stir up such a storm near the coast, it was clear that they didn't care about the life and death of the port city by the shore. To everyone here, this was an imminent disaster. He brought his disciples to hide in the pirates' cave and activated the island's protective formation, waiting for the storm to pass. Unfortunately, the fluctuations of the formation had exposed their existence. The 2 demons who were fighting fiercely on the sea soon found the island. One of them waved his demonic palm and flattened the island with one slap. When he raised his hand, the souls of the master and disciples on the island were between his fingers. Damn, I thought it was some kind of perfect tonic. I didn't expect the quality to be so poor. It's not even enough to fill the gap between my teeth. With a raise of his hand, he killed an entire sect. The demon was extremely dissatisfied and spat out a few curses. Then, he swallowed the souls in his palm. However, when he closed his bloody mouth, his arm trembled because of the attack of the opponent's magic, and a soul escaped. The fish that escaped the net was Black. Black couldn't remember what happened after that. He only knew that in the end, a righteous cultivator came to kill the demons and killed both demons. The river was clean and the sea was peaceful. However, the casualties that had been caused were irreversible. Black, who survived, was discovered by that cultivator. His soul was preserved, and later, he was given a body by chance, and everything was restored to its original state. After that, his path of cultivation entered a new stage. That righteous cultivator came from a famous sect and had a huge amount of resources that the cultivators of the border port could not imagine. Black followed him all the way to cultivate, from the king pill to the nascent soul stage to the peak. In the hundreds of years that followed, his achievements were unimaginable. However, he never experienced the simple happiness on the island again. Whether it was the king pill or the nascent soul stage, the growth of strength was just to achieve a simple goal: to survive. Black could never forget the fear and panic when he and his master were trembling in fear in the cave of the island, waiting for the end of the tsunami. He also could not forget the despair when the island that he had been operating for many years was destroyed by a palm. He no longer wanted to be close to death. As long as he could stay away from death, he was willing to do anything. And in this world, there was no better guarantee of survival than having strong strength. Doing good and accumulating virtue was just a joke. Hiding from the world was just deceiving oneself. The only way was to become stronger and stronger. It was just that the qualifications of a cultivator were limited. Not everyone could become stronger without limit. So what should he do? Of course, it was to follow the strong. As long as they were strong, they were worth following. No matter good or evil, there was no right or wrong. On that day on the island, the kind-hearted fishermen and cultivators were no match for the vicious devil, so they were completely annihilated. And the devil was no match for the righteous cultivators, so he was also beheaded. The law of the jungle was the truth of the immortal cultivation world, and it had nothing to do with good or evil. In addition, one must learn to occupy the righteousness, because righteousness was also a kind of strength. Those righteous cultivators often did things with righteousness, but did they really want to do things in a dignified manner? For hundreds of years, Black had seen many so-called righteous cultivators who did despicable things in the name of righteousness. Their way of doing things was even more heinous than those evil cultivators and devils, but because of righteousness, they were always successful. In 9 regions, the evil path had never been able to overwhelm the righteous path. In the final analysis, it was because of the lack of righteousness. Therefore, even if they did despicable things, they must do it in the name of righteousness. Black never thought that his idea was wrong. Therefore, when the brilliant Sun Booping began to form a gang, he actively joined it. When Sun Booping revealed the truth and told everyone that the future enemy would be the fallen immortals, Black did not hesitate to abandon his original companions. A good bird chooses a tree to nest in, and the strong side was righteous. Since the fallen immortals were stronger than anyone else in 9 regions, then of course, they were more righteous than anyone else. Following the fallen immortals was far more righteous than being part of the resistance army. There was no doubt that following the fallen immortals was the right thing to do. This belief supported Black for more than 10,000 years, until an ant named Luo Shao destroyed it all. After making an unforgivable mistake, Black could be sure that his master, who had followed him all his life, would inevitably abandon him. Thus, the so-called righteousness of the fallen immortals that he had been following for more than 10,000 years was shattered. What fallen immortals? What descending from the upper realm? Go to hell. As long as he could survive, he could do whatever it took. So what if he betrayed again? Perhaps in the future, the fallen immortals would eventually come to 9 regions and turn everything into ashes, but as long as he could live for a quarter of an hour, it was worth it. The only problem was Luo Shao, who had never trusted him and held the power of his life and death. If this kind of person was not eliminated, his betrayal would be meaningless. He was still in a precarious situation, and his life was hanging by a thread. The other party was likely to kick him out after he lost his value, just like the fallen immortals. Therefore, he must find a way to kill Luo Shao. That Baldy was cunning and cautious, so the general method would not work. Setting a trap in Netherworld Mountain was the best opportunity. Only he was familiar with the operation of the law there, so he could take advantage of the terrain to eradicate Kanglan and Luo Xiao at once. He was the only one who could claim the huge credit. In this way, the previous killing in the Wanxian League could also be alleviated. Unfortunately, although his design was good, it fell short of success. Luo Xiao was really a powerful character. In the Netherworld Mountain Immortal Trap Array, he took advantage of the terrain to make a desperate fight, but he failed to really suppress him. Later, when Luo Xiao caught his breath, the series of performances did not leave any room for Black to fight back. Thus, the hero became a spy, and the road to life became a road to death. How ironic. When he thought about it carefully, this was really his own fault. He betrayed everyone, so he was betrayed by everyone. Wasn't this the most appropriate ending? It was just that, he was really not reconciled. He didn't want to die, and he didn't want it to end like this. There were still too many things to do, so how could he stop here? Facing the muzzle of Wang Lu's cannon, Black's body trembled slightly, and he opened his mouth to say the last sentence. However, at this moment, the muzzle suddenly moved away, revealing the bright smile on the face of the giant divine weapon. Ha ha ha, congratulations, you have successfully passed our final round of interview with this rich face. You don't understand? In fact, the reason is very simple. For a three-surnamed slave like you to seek refuge, we must be very careful. Although many of what Luo Xiao said just now were false accusations, as a hypothesis, we can't find any reason to refute it. Perhaps you are really playing the trick of injuring yourself to gain confidence, or perhaps in Netherworld Mountain, Kanglan is really taking the opportunity to recuperate. We can't make a conclusive judgment, so we have to make the situation a little more complicated. At this time, Black also gradually regained his ability to think. So, you cooperated with Luo Xiao to put on a show, to test my reaction? And the results are still satisfactory. Not to mention, I had already blasted through the Netherworld Mountain with one shot, but you didn't even look at it. If you are said to be a warrior who adheres to lofty ideals, this performance is really a little unreasonable. Luo Xiao also sneered. Until the last moment, he is thinking about his own life and death. Such a person, in a sense, is more reliable. As long as we control his life and death, we can ensure his loyalty. Black was silent for a long time. So, I have passed? Yes, you have passed. Welcome to the warm family of the Wanxian League. However, of course, in view of your previous performance, we can't give you the treatment of a formal member. Luo Xiao stretched out his hand. Originally, he has been my dog. I suggest that we let him start from a dog. I will shoulder the responsibility of the owner, how about it? Except for you, I'm afraid no one is interested in raising this dog. After Wang Lu finished speaking, he looked around again. Hey, what's with the expressions of the few supremes? After listening to us for so long, you still haven't figured out what happened? This comprehension seems to be a bit too low. The few supremes looked at each other. After a while, Jury sighed. Kuchin, that guy, left early. It was a wise choice. Sorry for updating so late. Chapter 773. Time always flew by unconsciously. On the stellar peak, on a whim, Feng Yin put down the writing brush in his hand and looked at the night sky with deep eyes. The stars were shining, and the light was panoramic. The soul-stirring battle with the immortal from the upper realm 10 years ago seemed to have happened yesterday. Every detail had been deeply engraved in his mind, and from time to time, ripples appeared in his mind, which made people feel a faint chill. In the battle with Kanglan Immortal, Feng Yin and the other Supremes only joined the battle halfway after receiving the warning. The process of the battle was not long, and there were only a few rounds in total. He too led the other 4 people to set up a cage with the 9 regions map, and then Kanglan broke through it. Then he forced the opponent to the sky, and Wang Wu, who was waiting in the sky, smashed him down with a mountain into the Netherworld Mountain. In just a few rounds, everyone walked a few laps between life and death. At that time, if Feng Yin failed to detect the opponent's surprise attack in time and preemptively attacked with the stellar sword, perhaps Hichu Daoran would have been defeated by the Yin and Yang hands, and the entire 9 regions map would have fallen apart. If he hadn't left some true yuan to protect his body when he collided with the Yin and Yang hands, perhaps he wouldn't have been able to stop Kanglin's struggle. If Wang Wu didn't wait at a high place in advance and blocked Kanglin's way, then no one could control Kanglin after he rushed into the astral wind layer. It was really dangerous. It could be said that 9 regions would have slipped into the abyss. However, in the end, it was over. 10 years had passed. 10 years had passed since that battle. During this period, a lot of things had happened. For example, Mom, hurry up, or we can't catch up with the magic shuttle. There was a secluded town at the foot of Navy Blue Mountain. In the middle of an elegant courtyard, a little girl in a beautiful felt hat anxiously waved her arm to urge her mother. A moment later, a young woman walked out of the courtyard, carrying a small leather bag. She held the little girl's hand and unfolded a light muslin from the bag. Then, she carried the 2 of them and flew towards a tall tower outside the town. There was a spacious platform at the top of the tower, and many people had already gathered there. The mother and daughter found a place where there were fewer people and waited. The little girl was very lively. Not long after, she couldn't bear the loneliness and wanted to run around, but was stopped by her mother. Fortunately, not long after, a flying shuttle flew over like lightning from the horizon. After stopping at the edge of the platform, the side hatch opened, revealing a spacious interior. A middle-aged cultivator came out and said in a clear voice, "We have arrived at Kankingshan Station, please hurry up and board the shuttle." The people who had been waiting on the platform for a long time began to board the flying shuttle one after another. From the outside, the flying shuttle looked to be over 300 feet long, and the widest part was only 4 or 5 feet wide. However, the interior was actually a spacious space of hundreds of square meters, which could accommodate thousands of people. After the passengers of Mount Zangyama came up, the shuttle didn't seem crowded. It didn't take long for the shuttle to start slowly, and before long, it climbed to the highest speed, really like lightning. The little girl was lying at the transparent window on the side of the shuttle, looking at the rapidly retreating scene outside the window with great interest, as if she was intoxicated. Most of the passengers who boarded the shuttle at Kankingshan Station were cultivators from the Navy Blue sect. Their cultivation base was between Qi cultivating stage and Foundation establishment stage. With such cultivation base, they naturally couldn't talk about flying sword. However, the speed of this magic shuttle was comparable to the flying sword of a Daoist master of Yuanying stage, which was already an unimaginable speed for them. However, the size of 9 regions was enough to make most of the so-called high speed meaningless. After flying for more than an hour on the magic shuttle, they didn't even get out of the cloud region where Kankingshan was located. After all, the little girl didn't grow up, so she soon felt bored. She pouted and asked by the window, "Mom, when will we arrive at Netherworld Mountain?" "Don't worry, we'll be there soon." "How soon is soon?" The little girl was somewhat dissatisfied with her mother's perfunctory answer. She shook her mother's hand to make it clear. When her mother smiled bitterly, the middle-aged flight attendant who passed by replied with a smile, "There are still 2 hours, little sister, don't worry." "Well, okay." The little girl obviously showed a bitter face. "Hee, look at you, you can't wait for a moment? How about this, there's a model of the giant divine weapon on this magic shuttle, I'll get it for you to play." Okay. Her mother suddenly felt a little embarrassed. "Excuse me, how much is it to rent the model of the giant divine weapon?" "It's free, this is a special discount of this shuttle." The stewardess smiled generously and then took out a foot-long humanoid toy model from the workshop. It was glittering with a metallic luster. He handed it to the little girl. This kind of model was usually only liked by boys. However, when the little girl saw the model, her eyes lit up, and even her saliva almost flowed out. She was so charmingly naive that the surrounding passengers couldn't help but laugh. The model was made by imitating the famous giant divine weapon. Every joint of the body could be moved and extended. If the user had cultivation base and poured magical power into the model, there could be more complex changes. It belonged to the professional version, so the price was very high. Unfortunately, the little girl had not yet begun to cultivate, so she couldn't use those complex functions. The game time always passed quickly. After a while, the magic shuttle stopped in front of a mountain. The flight attendant's voice echoed in the shuttle, "Passengers, we have arrived at the Netherworld Mountain Station. Please take your belongings and prepare to get off the shuttle." The little girl reluctantly returned the giant divine weapon model, but soon her attention was attracted by the scenery outside the shuttle. She hopped and dragged her mother forward. Outside the shuttle was also a platform of a tower. It was just that it was much larger than the tower at the foot of Navy Blue Mountain. Moreover, the platform was divided into multiple floors, and there were many shuttles parked at the edge of each floor. The shuttles were of different sizes, and the large ones were about 300 meters long, which looked magnificent. After the passengers on the shuttle got off, they quickly gathered together. On the platform, there were already cultivators in eye-catching clothes floating in the air in advance. Flying was prohibited on the platform, so it was very eye-catching. Those cultivators' cultivation base was not particularly high, but they all had quite good affinity, which made people have a good impression at first glance. Good afternoon, tourists. Welcome to the Netherworld Mountain Hall of Resistance against the Fallen Immortal. I am He Yuan Shan, the tour guide here. You can call me Little He. As Little He spoke, he flew to the depths of the Netherworld Mountain. The Netherworld Mountain was originally a barren mountain known as a forbidden area, but in recent years, it has been fully developed. A high platform was built outside the mountain where the shuttle could be docked, and the inside of the mountain was hollowed out and built into a world-famous memorial hall, which attracted thousands of people to visit every year. We all know that there is a very powerful enemy in 9 regions today called the Fallen Immortal. This word has been very popular in recent years, but in fact, as early as tens of thousands of years ago, some people realized the existence of the Fallen Immortal and began a long journey of struggle. First of all, let us come to the Great Desolation Hall to learn about the story of the Fallen Immortal in that era. There were a large number of antiques and materials on display in the hall. Most of them were the legacies left by the Dixian in the Tomb of Immortals. That was the evidence that they spent countless efforts to collect in those days. From the Desolation Age to their era, there were all kinds of information. In the guide's skillful explanation, the tourists were immersed in the washing of the long river of history. "Mom, when can we get to the Immortal Trap Array?" While people were quietly listening to Little He's explanation, the voice of a little girl seemed very attractive. The little girl's mother nodded apologetically to the others, looking very embarrassed. At this time, the tour guide Little He said with a smile, "Actually, I think it's not only this little sister, everyone should be a bit impatient to see the most important part of this memorial hall. Fortunately, our previous content is basically over. I will take everyone to the Immortal Trap Array to see the living fallen immortal. Please be mentally prepared, don't be too surprised when the time comes." Along the winding passage inside the Netherworld Mountain, the group soon came to an open and spacious place. Everyone, look below. The man who is sitting cross-legged and motionless is the fallen immortal. His name is Kanglan, and he once forcibly came to 9 regions, which almost caused a great disaster. But don't be afraid, he has been completely sealed, trapped in the gap between time and space. For him, the passing of 10,000 years in the outside world is just like a breath of time. It's just that his breath of time will never end. In a sense, he is actually like a dead person. With that, Little He suddenly landed on the ground, picked up a broken stone, and threw it at Kanglan, who was sitting cross-legged in the distance, which hit him on the head. "Look, there will be no problem." "Ah. We can throw stones?" A tourist exclaimed in disbelief. "What if we wake him up?" Little He said with a smile, "Don't worry, the Immortal Trap Array is still there, so he won't wake up no matter what. Just throw it at ease. He is an immortal, after all. With our means, even if we use our strongest spells, we won't be able to hurt him even half a hair." "Is this really possible?" Little he nodded and said, "Of course, don't you see the instructions on the side?" It was written by Taoist Master Wang Lu himself, so how could it be fake? Everyone looked in the direction of Little He's finger and saw that it was written on the wall, "It is shameful to waste food, please do not throw food at will, or throw stones at will." The handwriting was indeed Wang Lu's handwriting. In addition to throwing stones, you can also draw whatever you want on his body, such as drawing turtles or insulting words. But this will cost extra, and then the staff will bring you up close to paint. If there is a need, you can tell me and I will contact them for you. Because the supply cannot meet the demand, the current market price is 10,000 spirit stones per word. We can keep it for you for the day. Every night, there will be staff to clean Kanglan's body. 10,000 spirit stones per word, just to keep it for a day, isn't that too expensive? He is an immortal, after all. To be able to leave words on an immortal, 10,000 spirit stones is not expensive at all. While Little He was bargaining with the tourist, the little girl said loudly, "Mom, I think there are already words on that uncle's body." Little He said with a smile, "Little girl has good eyesight." That's right, in the beginning, Taoist Master Wang Lu wrote words on his body. We won't paint these words. When he followed the little girl's gaze and saw the words on Kanglan's body, he suddenly felt that he could not continue. The little girl's eyes flashed with innocence. "I know that word, it's the word Zheng." But why did he write the word Zheng on that uncle's butt? And he didn't finish writing the word Zheng. What does this mean? Next to the immortal trap array, there was dead silence. No one knew how to answer such a question. Chapter 774. Report on the work of Netherworld Mountain Memorial Hall. Hey, last year's annual income has exceeded 10 million spirit stones. In recent years, it has really been operating well. On the stellar peak, Feng Yin Taoist Master roughly read the annual work report presented by Netherworld Mountain Memorial Hall. His mouth praised again and again, and his heart was filled with emotion. 10 years ago, the fallen immortal was like a huge shadow that shrouded the hearts of the world. But now, the fallen immortal was displayed in the memorial hall as clay figurines for people to visit and even ********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* a high fee, only children of the rich second generation could do it. However, the contrast was so great that people who had experienced the past 10 years could not help but sigh with emotion. It was not that no one questioned whether this behavior would create an atmosphere of blind optimism. In the memorial hall, the clown-like Kanglan immortal could not represent the true strength of the fallen immortal. Those who spent 10,000 spirit stones to write the character, Zheng, on Kanglans but could never imagine how Kanglan immortal, who only had 30% of his power, was able to deal with the top powerhouses in 9 regions with ease. With such blind optimism, once the crisis came, however, the person who designed this memorial hall also gave a very convincing defense. First, when did the safety of 9 regions depend on those at the bottom who would be blindly optimistic and pessimistic? Whether they were blindly optimistic or pessimistic, what could they do? When the war came, it was not their turn to contribute. It would be a good thing if they didn't add to the chaos. Therefore, instead of frightening them by saying how severe the crisis of the fallen immortal was, it was better to let them write the character, Zheng, happily. Second, when did it become your turn to tell me what to do with my decision? In the eyes of the knowledgeable people, the weight of the second reason was obviously much heavier. The kid who just entered Yuanying stage 10 years ago had now become the world's #1 expert. In 9 regions, he could walk sideways and enjoy unlimited glory. This was actually beyond everyone's expectation. Although everyone already knew that with Wang Lu's ability, he would one day follow in the footsteps of Qin Shi Huang and great ancestor Desheng, far ahead of everyone else on the path of cultivation. But no matter how they thought about it, it would be decades or even centuries later. After all, it took him more than 30 years to reach Yuanying stage. Even if there was no bottleneck in his void spirit route, and after breaking through the shackles, Wang Lu's cultivation speed was getting faster and faster. However, who would have thought that he would directly open a giant divine weapon at the bottom of the group of immortal tombs and become invincible from then on? At that time, many young people who looked up to Wang Lu were disillusioned. It was like a hot-blooded and inspirational story where the protagonist went through hardships and obstacles and finally succeeded in his business. When his career began to rise, suddenly, a distant relative left him an inheritance that was enough to buy an entire country. From then on, the protagonist could eat tea eggs and drink cola, a magical Western beverage, every day with ease. This story was undoubtedly to educate everyone that self-struggle was not comparable to inheritance. The implication was too realistic and too dark. However, while countless people were envious and jealous of Wang Lu, they probably didn't know what Wang Lu himself had paid for it. With his qualification, ascending to immortality was by no means the end. Even in the immortal world, he would certainly be able to thrive. Even in Feng Yin's view, those glorious historical figures might not be comparable to him. For example, immortal Qin Shi Huang and great ancestor Desheng. 20 years of ascension was indeed an insurmountable peak, but did they ever fight against a sage-level enemy in the Shudan stage? Did they ever fight against Dixian when they were in the King Pill? Wang Lu's foundation was so deep that it had already surpassed the predecessors. With such a foundation, his future was really limitless. But now, in order to improve his strength as soon as possible in order to deal with the crisis of the fallen immortal, he locked himself in the giant divine weapon and assimilated with the law left by the predecessors. Although this could rapidly improve his strength in a very short period of time, it also damaged his future because he had lost his own path. Perhaps with Wang Lu's peerless qualification, he could still walk his own path, but it would be far more difficult than it was now. Of course, there was no need to say these words to others, otherwise, it would be hard to avoid the suspicion of showing off. However, the #1 expert in the world. Thinking of the dazzling halo that Wang Lu now held and the way he improved his strength, even the generous and simple Feng Yin felt slightly absent-minded. When he came back to his senses, he found that he somehow had a torch and a barrel of fuel in his hand. Strange, is this the temperature of the bamboo room out of balance, so I subconsciously want to keep warm? At the same time, in the southern heaven region, near the ruins of the group of immortal tombs, a huge metal puppet was doing incredible dexterity maneuvers in the air. Around it, there was a dense net of thick beams of light, which was like a storm of oppressive force. That huge puppet was thousands of meters tall, and the rain of beams of light not only came from all directions, but the distance between each beam was often only 10 meters or even less. In theory, there was no space to dodge, but the puppet could constantly change its posture to avoid most of the beams of light. A few that could not dodge, in front of the beam of light, opened up a hole in its body, allowing the beam of light to pass smoothly without detonating the huge energy contained in it. For a time, the raindrop-like beams of light fell on the body of the giant divine weapon, but they passed through without any hindrance, causing no harm at all. This dazzling dodging lasted for half an hour, and then the toe of the giant divine weapon burst out a ball of light. After being hit by the beam of light, the surface of the giant divine weapon only flashed a layer of light, which transferred the burst of energy away without any damage. However, the fact that it was hit still made it stop its dodging action, and then its body shrank sharply. A moment later, it shrank into a foot-long model, which was then held in the hand of a young man in a red and white robe. At the same time, the surrounding rain of light also converged and disappeared. Tetragon's sigh followed. It's still not good. If we can't even hold on for an hour with this kind of density, we can't be the main force on the frontal battlefield. Wang Lu, I think we need to increase the intensity of our training a little more. Wang Lu's hand trembled and he almost dropped the giant divine weapon. He said, "Are you done? Do you think the intensity should be increased like this?" Tetragon frowned and said with some dissatisfaction, "What else? It's been 10 years, but the synchronization rate still can't exceed 50%. And God knows when the passage between the two worlds will be completely opened. At that time, when the fallen immortals attack, how many can you stop? 1, 2. You're indeed the strongest in 9 regions now, but do you really think that this title can stop the fallen immortals?" This series of doubts was really powerful. After a long silence, Wang Lu looked up to the sky and sighed with an expression of having experienced the vicissitudes of life. King want it again, don't you? Tetragon's face turned red, and then the sky changed color, and lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Don't talk nonsense. Who wants it? Wang Lu sneered and said, what do you think? Every day, you complain that my synchronization rate is low. The problem is, we've been trying to improve the synchronization rate for 10 years, but isn't it still the same trick? If you don't want to use that trick again, why do you have to talk about these clichés? Do you think I don't know what I'm capable of? Or do you think I'll relax and get carried away? So, in the final analysis, it's you who wants it. After a pause, Wang Lu looked at the blushing Tetragon and earnestly said, in fact, it's not shameful to want it. It's human nature to eat and lust. As a healthy woman, it's natural for you to have a need. If you tell me directly, I will definitely not refuse you. Of course, it doesn't mean that I'm a very casual person, but this is, after all, about 9 regions. If we do official business, no one can say anything. If you're so tsundere, it's a bit revealing. Nonsense. You're the tsundere, your whole family is tsundere. I think there's something wrong with your brain. Wang Lu thought for a moment and then said, it's okay, as long as the key parts are not damaged. Well, do you want it or not? Want your sister? Go to hell. With that, Tetragon shot a purple light at him. Wang Lu leaned his head to avoid it, but when he turned around, Tetragon had disappeared without a trace. Wang Lu waited in place for a while and then launched his primordial spirit to scan every grass and tree within a radius of thousands of miles. After confirming that there was no trace of Senior Gem Emperor, he sighed wearily and then slowly fell to the ground. As soon as he landed, someone came to find him. What a waste of God's gift. The voice was full of envy, jealousy, and other negative emotions. Moreover, the tone was very familiar. If it wasn't Wang Wu, who else could it be? It's such a waste for such a good young girl to fall into your hands. Wang Lu righteously corrected him. First, she only looks a bit petite. Her real age is the sum of our ages, divided by the minimum legal age. It's not illegal for me to push her 1,000 times. Second, she didn't fall into my hands. We're just in a business relationship. Following orders to have sex. You're quite good at finding excuses for yourself. Wang Wu was still gnashing her teeth in hatred. You're opening a large mechanical man and flirting with a peerless young girl. Don't you think your days are too good? Wang Lu was silent for a while and asked, from your tone, you also want it? Wang Wu snorted at this question. Do you still need to ask? I want it at any time. Let's see how much you can give. Let's not talk about a lot. I can give 10 or 20,000. Damn, 10 or 20,000? Are you trying to kill a chicken? Do you know how many mouths I have to feed here? Think about it carefully. If you, the world's #1, can't handle the situation, I'll have to step in when there's a problem. So hurry up and give me 200 million spirit stones. 200 million. I don't have spirit stones, but I do have some others. Chapter 775. In the Spirit Creek town at the foot of Spirit Sword Mountain, the former simple and crude Rue family inn was now a bustling place full of guests. The small wooden building was demolished and replaced by a 10-story high-rise building. Usually, each floor was overcrowded. The lady boss was no longer alone in the kitchen of the inn. Wonderful chefs from all over the 9 regions were busy here, providing all kinds of delicious food that could make people's appetite increase. At this moment, in the lobby of the first floor of the inn, there were a few cultivators wearing different Taoist robes chatting and drinking wine. One of them was a young man in a blue and white robe who looked about 25 or 26 years old. He was beaming with joy and enthusiasm. Ha ha ha, you say I'm bragging? If that's the case, then you don't understand me at all. I, Wang Zhong, may not be outstanding in terms of cultivation, but I'm a loyal person. This is publicly acknowledged. My name, Wang Zhong, was given to me by my young master. The person at the same table suddenly laughed and slapped the table. Ha ha ha, it's as if it's true. What kind of person is Taoist Master Wang Lu? How could he live with you and give you a name? Even if you're dreaming, it's too ridiculous. F***ck. You don't believe me? Then open your dog eyes and see clearly. What is this? Wang Zhong was indignant. He took out a piece of drawing paper from his mustard seed bag, on which there was a row of young people with different expressions. Look, this is the group portrait that Elder Huayun made for us after the immortal gathering. See this person? This is me at that time. Next to him is our young master, who is now the famous Taoist Master Wang Lu. If we weren't close, how could we stand together? Several of his friends came over to take a closer look and saw a young boy who looked 50 to 60% similar to the current Wang Zhong, standing next to Wang Lu. It was just that. Why does Taoist Master Wang Lu look like he dislikes you? Did you two really have a close relationship with each other? Wang Zhong was anxious. How could it be fake? Look at this. With that, he took out another piece of drawing paper. When we were in the Wang family village, the master asked a painter to draw a portrait of our family. See me? I'm the one standing next to Taoist Master Wang Lu. The few of them carefully examined him and finally found some traces of Wang Zhong's shadow on the dull-looking child. They reluctantly agreed with Wang Zhong's words. Alas, unexpectedly, the number one in 9 regions is quite down-to-earth when he was young. I've always heard people say that Taoist Master Wang Lu is the chosen one of heaven, and that he was born with a strange phenomenon, which he was destined to be extraordinary. It seems that it is just a rumor of the later. Wang Zhong curled his lips and thought to himself, you haven't seen him bickering with the landlord, old Master Wang, in the wilderness of the Wang family village. But now it was not appropriate for him to say anything, so he just smiled and said nothing. But, Wang Zhong, since you were so close to Taoist Master Wang Lu, why are you so miserable now? At that time, Wang Zhong felt that his molars were cracked, thinking, this group of grandsons came all the way to Blue River region to get some mileage. They ate and drank from me, but when I boasted a few words at the dinner table, they stabbed my sore spot. It seems that it's really necessary to break up with 1 or 2 people as a warning to others. However, when asked, he couldn't avoid answering. Wang Zhong had to sigh and said, how could an ordinary person like me keep up with the footsteps of Taoist Master Wang Lu? And since I can't keep up, I don't want to drag him down. For me, having a friendship with Taoist Master Wang Lu was a blessing in 3 lifetimes. But for Taoist Master Wang Lu, I'm a complete burden. Although he has always taken care of me, I should have self-awareness. Therefore, I gradually broke up with him, so as not to drag him down in the future. His friends at the table immediately showed infinite respect for him and urged him to drink. Wang Zhong smiled bitterly and drank it, and then began to boast again. Before long, after 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, the group of people had drunk the immortal wine until they were dizzy. Wang Zhong came up and said, actually, it's really hard to be friends with Taoist Master Wang Lu. For a dazzling person like him, if you get too close to him, you will be blinded. Not to mention me, this insignificant person, aren't the situation of the other successor disciples of our Lingjian school the same? Just like senior sister Lu Li, what a peerless talent. Her brilliant sword heart is powerful, haven't you all heard about it? But what about now? She was left behind by Taoist Master Wang Lu until her back can't be seen. By the way, Elder Qin, the situation of your Xingjing sect's Qianghua is similar, right? In those days, she was always the first among her peers, steadily suppressing the other lead disciples. What about now? The cultivator named Elder Chen said with a wry smile, now? Right now, even our old Supreme Hichu can't suppress the glory of Taoist Master Wang Lu. So what if senior sister Qianghua is powerful? Speaking of which, Taoist Master Wang Lu is too outrageous. In the bottom of the group of immortal tombs, he went from the number 1 disciple to the number 1 in 9 regions. How could we, who have worked so hard to cultivate, endure this? Forget it, don't say these sour words. Even if that giant divine weapon is handed over to you, can you drive it? A cultivator next to him shook his head. I heard my master and uncles mention it when they were chatting. In addition to Wang Lu, I'm afraid there's no third person in the world who can drive that giant divine weapon. Moreover, the leader of the Dixian sect only recognizes Wang Lu. This is not luck, it's all based on ability. But, you're right, it's really hard to be friends with such a person. Speaking of which, you just mentioned Taoist Master Lu Li. I heard that she used to have an unusual relationship with Taoist Master Wang Lu, is that true? When Wang Zhong heard this question, he couldn't help but think, you ask me, but who the hell should I ask? I'm just an ordinary inner court disciple, how could I talk to those high and mighty successor disciples? Would they come to me to talk about their emotional problems? Moreover, if Lu Li really couldn't think it through and came to me to talk about it, I would dare to listen. People who know too much will not have a good end. However, thinking of how he had boasted at the table just now, Wang Zhong couldn't just say that he didn't know. He coughed and said, in the past, they were indeed close, but now? Taoist Master Wang Lu is, after all, too high and mighty, so their relationship is estranged. The so-called immortal and mortal are different. In fact, it's the same for cultivators who set foot on the immortal path. Taoist Master Wang Lu of immortal level and senior sister Lu Li, who has just broken through to Yuanying stage, are not people of the same world. Everyone suddenly sighed, and then one of them suddenly said in surprise, so, does that mean my big brother Zhan Zai has a chance? I heard that in the past, he was infatuated with Taoist Master Lu Li. Now that Taoist Master Lu Li has been kicked by Taoist Master Wang Lu, my big brother's chance has come. Upon hearing this, Wang Zhong's jaw nearly dislocated, thinking, don't you have AF** king brain? Saying such treacherous words at the foot of our Lingjian school, do you think you've lived too long? At the same time, he was annoyed that he shouldn't have mistakenly made friends with these bandits. These 10,000 arts sect clowns were really a disaster. The next moment, Wang Zhong's ominous premonition unfortunately came true. You guys seem to be having a good time. Wang Zhong suddenly felt that he was sober from his drunkenness. The voice that came from behind him was so familiar, which had long left a deep impression in Wang Zhong's heart. Even if decades had passed, it would not fade in the slightest. Lady boss. He never thought that the lady boss, who was no longer in charge of the inn's work, would actually appear here. However, the lady boss simply ignored him. Her eyes arrogantly glanced at the clown of 10,000 Arts Sect. You're from 10,000 Arts Sect? Go back and tell your senior brother to do more things and dream less. At this time, other people can live a befuddled life, but he can't. If you can't concentrate your mind on cultivation, you might as well have a sterilization operation as soon as possible. Your own peach blossom calamity hasn't been cleansed yet, so don't have the idea of hitting other people's women. After a pause, the lady boss continued, although that kid Wang Lu is not a kind person, he has always been generous to the people around him. If there's a chance, he would never stand idly by. Therefore, you don't have to worry about whether Lu Li and the others can keep up with Wang Lu. Wang Lu has already thought of a way to help them quickly improve their strength. Not to mention, it's not a problem for them to reach the level of supreme. With that, the lady boss of the Ru family turned around and left. As she walked, she frowned and muttered to herself, what the hell, who's that stinking brat in blue and white clothes? He looks familiar, but I can't recognize him. The cultivator of 10,000 Arts Sect, who was pointed at by her, suddenly stood up. You said that Taoist Master Wang Lu is generous to the people around him, so why did he leave Wang Zhong alone? I heard that Taoist Master Lu Li broke through Yuanying stage a few years ago with the help of Taoist Master Wang Lu, and now there's a shortcut to Supreme, so why didn't he consider Wang Zhong? The lady boss didn't even turn her head. His face value is too low. At the same time, in the Southern Heaven region, Wang Lu, who had just finished his soul-stirring synchronization rate improvement special training, quickly began his new work before he could catch his breath. 10 years had passed, and earth-shaking changes had taken place in 9 regions. However, Wang Lu's busyness had not changed at all. There were still many things that needed him to deal with, and each of them was of great importance, so he couldn't afford to be careless. A cultivator with a rigid and serious expression stood beside Wang Lu and reported, "Daoist Master Wang Lu, the heaven-breaking workshop reported that they are ready to be tested at any time." Wang Lu smiled. "Very good, I'll go now." With that, his figure flashed, and in a twinkling of an eye, he appeared thousands of miles away, in the underwater world of the Red Sea in the eastern border region. After more than 10 years of synchronization with the giant divine weapon, Wang Lu's use of the power of the giant divine weapon had become more and more free and easy. With just a lift of his hand, he had the power to tear the space and penetrate the tunnel. However, if not for this, he wouldn't have come to the Red Sea so casually. This beautiful sea was now one of the forbidden areas of 9 regions, because the workshop on the seabed was busy building the ultimate weapon that could determine the future fate of 9 regions. In the empty and spacious testing area of the workshop, a row of dozens of meters-long metal giants stood quietly on one side. A cultivator in white said nervously to Wang Lu, "Daoist Master Wang Lu, the latest batch of test machines have passed the verification procedure, and now they are waiting for you to personally test them." Wang Lu nodded. "Let's get started." Among the row of test machines, a light blue giant suddenly trembled all over, and its eyes glowed with a glimmer of light. Then it took a step forward, and its heavy footsteps shook the testing area slightly. The giant walked to the center of the testing area, nodded slightly to Wang Lu, and then a sweet and lovely girl's voice came out from it, Senior brother, I'm ready." Wang Lu let out a sigh of relief, and then stretched out 3 fingers of his right hand forward, releasing a golden polygon. "Lu Li, attack me." "Okay." As soon as the voice fell, the metal giant spat out a dazzling light from its palm. Wang Lu frowned slightly, only to feel the pressure on his arm increase sharply. The golden polygon also deformed violently and almost collapsed. "Okay, stop." Wang Lu smiled and took back his absolute domain. Although it was just a casual release, although he didn't deploy the giant divine weapon at this time, which led to only about 20% of the power output, this was still enough to match the supreme level defense. Lu Li could stab the absolute domain with her sword, so her attack power had already firmly stood at the supreme level. Considering that there were still many details that needed to be adjusted, and there was room for further improvement in performance, it could be said that this test machine was a success. And this result was also clearly seen by the other staff in the workshop, and many of them had already cheered. The one who stood next to Wang Lu and was responsible for reporting the results of the work was so excited that his whole body trembled. "Daoist Master Wang Lu, it seems that this time, it's really a success." Wang Lu nodded. "Yes, this time, it finally looks like it can be used in actual combat." The staff member excitedly asked, "By the way, since this batch of machines can be put into actual combat, then may I ask Daoist Master, have you thought of a name for this batch of machines?" "Name?" Wang Lu frowned. "These test machines are the mass-produced models that I designed by dividing the fire from the giant divine weapon and combining the resources of the Tomb of Immortals and the Wanxian League. The performance will be worse than the original, but it can be made up for with quantity. In this case, let's call it Zaku." Chapter 776. The Red Sea Underwater Workshop's new experimental machine, Zaku, has achieved comprehensive success. Good. On the stellar peak, the tired-looking Feng Yin Daoist master suddenly raised his spirit and praised it several times. His tiredness was swept away. For a person who continuously dealt with high-intensity official business, it was not easy to find an eye-catching document in a mountain of official documents. In recent years, the work that Feng Yin took over became more and more onerous. The Kunlun lenses on the bridge of his nose were changed again and again, and each time, it was a bit heavier than before. However, most of the official reports only made people feel worse, and the good news was very limited. In the past 10 years, the world only felt that the world was peaceful and everything was thriving, but they could not see the hidden crisis behind the prosperity. If there was no great crisis, how could the immortal cultivation world be peaceful and prosperous? Even the righteous path and the demons who had deep resentment had put down their contradictions and worked together. If there was no very special reason, how could it be possible? The crisis of the fallen immortals was not alleviated by the victory 10 years ago. On the contrary, it was precisely because the victory against Kanglan came too quickly that it alerted the enemy. No matter how slow and careless the fallen immortals in the upper realm were, after losing a fierce general, they would certainly realize that the current 9 regions was not a fish on the chopping block. Once the fallen immortals took it seriously, how could the current 9 regions have any hope of winning? Over the past 10 years, whether it was the Wanxian League or the Dixian in the Tomb of Immortals, everything they did was to strive for more chances of winning and more hope. Unfortunately, after 10 years, the dark clouds above their heads were still as gloomy as before. Fortunately, the good news from the bottom of the Red Sea could be regarded as a glimmer of light. The first 12 Zaku have all been assigned to their positions. The pilot will complete the initial integration within 3 months. The synchronization rate is expected to reach 20%, and they have the fighting power of deity stage. After reading the report of the Red Sea in detail, Feng Yin could not help but push up his glasses. This pair of thick Kunlun mirror was, of course, not to alleviate myopia, but to enable Feng Yin to launch his stellar divine eyes with less consumption and to see the accurate future from thousands of cause and effect lines. 12 more soul formation cultivators in 3 months. This new prototype is indeed impressive. By the standard of the fallen immortals, the deity stage cultivators could only play the role of cannon fodder at most. However, considering that this was only 3 months of accelerated training and the result of a 20% synchronization rate, people could not help but look forward to the situation where the pilot could give full play to the body function. According to theoretical calculations, it will take the pilot 5 to 7 years to reach the optimal synchronization rate. At that time, the synchronization rate can reach more than 70%, and the pilot will possess the combat power of the body integration realm. A few pilots with a high degree of compatibility with the body can reach 90% synchronization rate and have the combat power of the Desheng stage. Feng Yin's eyes flickered when he saw this. As an inferior version of the prototype, the performance limits of this batch of experimental machines were not strong. Even if the pilot reached the theoretical upper limit of 100% synchronization rate, he could only exert the combat power of the peak Desheng stage, which was about the same as the outstanding Dixian cultivators such as Bai Zhe and Black. They were inferior to Tetragon, and there was a world of difference between them and the real immortals. However, the advantage was that the synchronization rate was relatively easy to increase. In 5 to 7 years, the synchronization rate could be more than half. In contrast, as the pilot of the prototype, Wang Lu, with his supreme talent, only reached 50% synchronization rate in 13 years. According to the most optimistic estimate, in 5 to 7 years, there will be 12 more Supremes in 9 regions. Although the number is not much, from King Pil Yuanying stage to Supremes in just a few years, I really can't expect more. Unfortunately. According to the analysis of the feedback data from the pilot, Lu Li, it can be determined that the original hypothesis is valid. That is, the pilot of Zaku must meet the following conditions. First, the pilot's cultivation base must be between King Pil and Yuanying stage, which has the best plasticity. Second, the pilot must have heavenly spirit root and excellent qualification, so that the pilot can complete the matching with Zaku in a short time and improve the synchronization rate. Third, the pilot must have a deep foundation, at least with a challenge rating of +8. When he read to this, Feng Yin couldn't help but wryly smile. The first of the 3 conditions put forward by Wang Lu was not difficult. With the vastness of 9 regions, there were countless King Pil Yuanying stage cultivators. However, heavenly spirit root was too rare. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was 1 in 10,000. Only in the top sects of the union of 10,000 immortals would disciples with heavenly spirit root continue to emerge. If it were a middle or low-rank sect, a cultivator with earthly spirit root was enough to be treated as a treasure. In fact, after the Age of Chaos, even natural spirit root was rare in the immortal cultivation world. Otherwise, Xingjing Sect's man-made spirit root wouldn't be so popular. As for the third condition, it was even more difficult. The challenge rating +8 mentioned by Wang Lu basically narrowed the choice by more than half. In the vast 9 regions, no matter how rare a King Pill Yuanying stage cultivator was, it could still be found. However, the challenge rating +8 meant that it was close to a whole stage. A +8 Daoist master who had just entered the King Pill stage could already beat an ordinary high-level King Pill Yuanying stage cultivator. This kind of fierce person was basically at the level of the lead disciple of a top-rank sect. Although there were many sects in the Wanxian League, there were only a few top-rank sections. And the lead disciple of those sects might not necessarily have the cultivation base of King Pill Yuanying stage. 100 people. Feng Yin Daoist master thought for a while. Combined with his current situation and his stellar divine eyes, he quickly made a judgment. If all the forces in 9 regions are mobilized, we should be able to gather 100 qualified people. And 100 Supremes and even Dixian stage cultivators are a powerful force that can't be ignored. The only question is whether the output of the Red Sea underwater workshop can keep up. In order to make these 12 zakus, the Wanxian League had already spent a lot of resources. More importantly, the core fire that made up the zakus was separated from the prototype by Wang Lu, and only he could produce it. According to Wang Lu, this separation was more similar to duplication, which would not hurt the source. However, the process was very complicated, very laborious, and the result was not stable. The type of fire produced was highly random. Some were powerful, and some were simply waste. These 12 zakus were the enhanced type that Wang Lu had accumulated for 5 years. However, it was impossible for Wang Lu to spend all his time separating the fire, so the production limit was very serious. However, just as he thought of this, Feng Yin saw that in the report, Wang Lu wrote, as the core component of the giant divine weapon, the quality of the fire is very important. The next step will be to try our best to improve the quality and production of the fire. Wang Lu wrote this part roughly, but Feng Yin Daoist master could see from the short text that Wang Lu was probably going to make a big move next. The words, "try our best," were not written casually. After thinking for a long time, Feng Yin Daoist master commented on the report, "This work is well done. I hope that the next work will be carried out in an orderly manner to ensure the effectiveness." After writing this report, Feng Yin Daoist master sighed, took off his glasses and decided to take a break. However, at this time, a golden flying sword flew over with a thin document. Request for instructions on the suspension of business in the Netherworld Mountain Memorial Hall? From Wang Lu. In the long night, in the deep darkness without a trace of light, a glimmer of light finally appeared. His instinctive yearning for the light caused the prisoner in the darkness to subconsciously approach it. However, behind the light was a figure that he hated to the bone. "It's been a long time, Senior Kanglan." XXXXXXXX. Calm down, speak human language. Howling like a baboon now won't help you improve your condition. Or are you in heat again and need me to write a few more words for you? As soon as he finished speaking, the volcano in the darkness was extinguished. Kanglan stopped howling and said coldly, "What are you doing here?" "I want to ask you something." "You think I'll answer?" "Then I'm here to write." "What do you want to know?" Wang Lu asked, "What's going on in the immortal realm?" Kanglan glanced at Wang Lu and did not answer. Wang Lu asked, "Why, you can't answer? You're restrained from divulging relevant information?" "It's not surprising, but I'm curious, is 9 regions worth so much attention for you guys?" "It's just a novice village. In terms of the surrounding spiritual energy, it can't be compared with the immortal world before the Age of Chaos. Now, it's simply a wasteland. In terms of vast land and abundant resources, it is rumored that the immortal world is vast and boundless. 9 regions is just a drop in the ocean in the immortal world. In terms of the quality of talent, all the people in our continent together may not be able to beat a great principal golden immortal. I don't know what the highest realm on your side is, so I'll just call it golden immortal for the time being." So, what are you guys doing here? Refining this world and turning it into a sacred magical tool? Killing all the creatures in 9 regions to refine a demonic treasure? But when I saw that you guys destroyed the demon world, there was no follow-up action. I really can't figure it out. After a series of questions, Kanglan still didn't say a word. Wang Lu smiled and said, after saying so much, you can't even answer a single question. It seems that the organization discipline on your side is quite strong, so let's talk about something easy. In your opinion, what do you think of my current strength? Kanglan chuckled and said nothing. It doesn't seem to be that good. But it doesn't look too bad, at least it's worth your time. So, what if I say that I can be 10 times stronger now? Kanglan was silent for a moment and then said, it doesn't make sense. Yes, a mere 10 times can't form an absolute crushing. However, it sounds like as long as I'm 10 times stronger, at least in terms of one-on-one fighting, it's enough to be on the stage. Kanglan shook his head and said, it doesn't make sense. Wang Lu ignored him and just speculated about his response and tone. Under the ideal condition of 100% synchronization rate, my fighting capacity can be about 2 to 3 times that of yours. I can occupy an absolute advantage and even kill you in seconds, but my strength is still on the same level. If this level can be on the stage. It seems that your group of fallen immortals is only 1 or 2 stages ahead of us, not as strong as we think. Is this because you guys are also a very weak group in the immortal world? When it came to this issue, Kanglan became silent again, but there was a slight change in his demeanor. Wang Lu asked again, speaking of which, there's one more thing that I find strange. You bunch of good-for-nothing scums do whatever you want in the lower realm. Is there no one who cares about those great principal golden immortals, supreme immortals, and the like? 9 regions has the Wanxian League, and the Western continent has the Holy Light religion, but there's no governing body like the Heavenly Court in the immortal world? Kanglan was still silent. TSK, you don't know anything, and you refuse to say anything useful. It's all based on my subjective guess. In that case, it seems that there's no need to liberate you from this memorial hall. You can continue to meditate here for people to write. See you in 10,000 years. Wait. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.